in 1956. Remember, he was world champion 5 times with 4 different teams. Mike Hawthorne, Phil Hill and John Surtees also won titles for Ferrari in the 50s and 60s, and the cars back then were beautiful, and they even sounded great, didn't they? Anyway, Ferrari went 11 years without winning a title until Niki Lauda won in 1975 in the iconic 312T. Throughout much of the 80s and 90s, though, Ferrari looked like they'd never go all the way again. Le Professeur Alain Prost came pretty close in 1990, but lost out to his bitter rival and former teammate at McLaren, Ayrton Senna. It was only when John Todt recruited a swathe of staff from outside of Italy, including Michael Schumacher, that the glory days returned 21 years after their last driver's title. The turn of the century saw the prancing horse sprint to an unprecedented 5 consecutive championship doubles. And after Schumacher left, Kimi Räikkönen reclaimed the driver's title immediately. But despite employing 1,500 people, the Iceman remains the last Ferrari world champion. So, 16 constructors' titles, 7 more than McLaren, and 15 drivers' titles, 4 more than, again, McLaren. Ferrari are truly Formula One's top team. Forza Ferrari.
Yeah, good evening, everybody, and welcome to tonight's edition of Trans-Europe Express. I'm Danny Kelly. Alongside me for the next 3 hours is Andy Brassell. We've got a lot. I mean, amazing, isn't it? Considering there's no club football really at any level, with all due respect to the Scandinavian and Irish leagues. There's just so much for us to get through. We'll have all the major stories from across the continent. We'll pay tribute, Trans-Europe Express tribute to Diogo, Jota and his brother Andre Silva. Of course we will. And we'll bring you a review of things happening in the Club World Cup. Mbappe Watch is very much front and centre. We have a special guest for you, Miguel Lorenzo Pereira, who's the author of a book called Passion, A Journey to the Soul of Spanish Football. Tim Vickery will join us from South America, and Andy will take us around the leagues towards midnight, which will include possibly the most bewildering story ever presented in 9 years of Trans-Europe Express. It involves an automatic body part, a performing bird, and much else besides. We'll get on to that very, very soon. He's Andy Brassell. I'm Danny Kelly. This is Trans-Europe Express. Welcome along, everybody. Express. Yeah, good evening, Andy.
Good evening, Danny. How are you?
I'm really, really good. As I said, we've got a lot to get through, but I think we'll start this evening's show, of course, by paying tribute to Diogo Jota and, of course, his brother, Andre Silva, who, you all know this now, tragically passed away on Thursday.
And Diogo Jota puts them in front. It's the first goal of the Arne Slot era.
It was quite a thing. He was our number 20. And we won our 20th league title this year.
He's the lad from Portugal, better than Figo, don't you know? I don't have the words to sort of explain the chasm that will be left by this.
Everyone knows what it's like to lose someone. It feels like we've lost one of our own.
Someone I've had the opportunity of meeting twice. He was so humble.
He was one of the greatest players that I've seen play for Wolves.
Surely now Wolverhampton Wanderers are going through through to the semi-final. A counter-attacking goal from Diogo Jota.
Without a doubt, that's my greatest memory, and he was the one who gave me that memory.
We've been through a lot as a city, and you know we gather ourselves, but you can't prepare for things like this, can you?
He was the kind of kid that you would like to have around you, you know.
Truly gutted, but what he did for Wolves fans will always remember that.
You know, there'll come a time when Liverpool return to Anfield and the fans sing "You'll Never Walk Alone," and they will sing it for him.
We knew him as a footballer, and as a footballer he was a fantastic one. What we knew of him as a man, he was a family man.
You'll never walk alone. You're always in our hearts. Never forget you. Never forget.
Andy Brassell, we're asked to do lots of things on Trans Europe Express over the years. I don't think we've ever had to do anything like this, and we'll try and make the best of it that we can. Look, well, first of all, let's talk about, I can't remember a footballer more in their prime, more in the public eye, being lost to us like this. Perhaps I've missed somebody, but it's not just a huge story, it's a terrible story for the friends and family, particularly, of the two men who died. And Diogo Jota, of course, is a player at the very top of the tree.
Yeah, he was and is a giant of European football. There's no doubt about that, and it's immensely sad. There's no getting away from that. But I mean, you talked about it's something that we've not really been asked to do before because it's such a sad and unusual circumstance. I was asked to write a tribute for Diogo Jota from a sort of Portuguese angle a couple of days ago. And I have to be honest, I was absolutely dreading it because when the news broke, of course, I checked a number of different sources and spoke to a few people because immediately you're thinking this can't be right, can it? And you know, you needed to check and double check, and it is still so difficult, I think, to get your head around. So, like, goodness knows what it's like for the families to whom we pass on our sympathies.
Absolutely.
But I found actually when I started writing this, it was nice. And, you know, I know we say that funerals, tributes, wakes, they're for the living. And that's true, isn't it? That we get to genuinely celebrate the life of that person. And I felt I was quite able to do that when I started writing about him, because I think it's easy to come out with a big string of cliches. And, you know, I don't think we really want to lean too hard into the sports side of it, because what he was as a player is almost not that important at the moment, even though, as I say, he was a giant of European football and really important to a number of teams, including most recently Liverpool and Portugal. But I think at the same time, that's the way in which we knew him, and the way in which so many people feel that they knew him, and that he was part of their lives, especially supporters of those two teams and the other teams
Andy,
that he's played for.
I can hear you, Andy. Sorry.
Look at some of his achievements and some of the marks that he left as his old club in Portugal, his first professional club in Portugal, Passos de Ferreira put it. They put, you've left your mark on the walls of this stadium. And we thought about that every day anyway. Even before this, I think there's actually some comfort in that, and to be able to really get beyond the cliches, get under the skin of what made him so special as a person who affected a load of people in the game as well as a player is really important.
Yeah, Andy, as I say, look, I think we have to be brutally honest here. Of course, it's a natural, human thing to talk about Diogo Jota as though we knew him or he was our friend or something like that. We've seen an awful lot of that. But of course, that's not right. And it isn't fair on the people who really, really knew him and who are mourning the human loss as well as the sporting loss. So I think while acknowledging 100% that there were people suffering hugely who did know the fella and his brother, we should stick to some extent what was it about him technically and personally that made him such an important player, because you followed him, of course, with your passionate interest imposing footballer, physical presence or anything like that. And yet every time he's been asked to take a step up, club-wise or internationally, he's found a way to affect football matches because of his combination of personality and, as I say, technical skills. Yeah, I mean, what we're saying here, Andy, we've lost Andy momentarily here, but what I'm saying here is that those of us who work in the media and those of us who express ourselves in social media and beyond, it's easy to fall into, not a trap, I'm not castigating people, a thing of being joining in the grief in a way that almost says we knew this person personally. And of course, we all know professional sports people at some level because they present themselves to us. We become incredibly attached to them. But what I want to get from Andy, what I need to get from Andy Brassell is what combination of factors made Jota such a player? Because even when he went to Wolves, the first few months, I would have said, this looks like a handy, good little player. But he then started to dominate their team when he got the transfer to Liverpool. You'd have said, well, this is a really big step up with all due respect to Wolverhampton Wanderers. And yet very quickly you could see that his teammates were keen on him and his bustling kind of busyness around the important parts of the final third of the pitch meant he was a real handful. I also like the fact, having said that he wasn't a large physical presence in games, that he was really, really good in the air. And, this was translated into a Portuguese team where you've got some of the most powerful personalities in European football. We all know, who we're talking about at the back and the front, people who have run Portuguese football for the best part of a decade and a half. He is welcomed in there. Again, that combination of personality and skill allows us to say, again, a person who there's no reason where you might have thought this is going to be an outstanding football. He just was. And I loved watching him play as well. I don't want to do the cliche of he played with a smile on his face, but he knew what he was doing. He improved the players around him because he was able to make either bring finishes to the great work they were doing, or just as often, and don't forget he was replacing Bobby Firmino. And that is no mean feat, but he was brilliant as well at finding those tiny geometric spaces in penalty areas where somebody who has made a run or a spin or any kind of move, the next thing they need is entirely dependent on someone else. It needs them to see them and to hit them with a ball. And Diogo Jota did that more times than not. Look, when the news broke, it is so hard. Liverpool fans, of course, I feel incredibly sorry for them because they will have got him as a hero. And of course, this is the year that they won the title in front of their own fans. And he was a very important part of that. I was impressed with the way, in England at least, other clubs, and of course it's been across Europe, but in England, other clubs, many of them with gripes with Liverpool over the years, both in person, went to Anfield and you saw people laying wreaths, but also I think the clubs have responded, not going over the top, I think that would be unfair, but just noting not just his passing, but what an excellent young man and young footballer he was. Andy, you, as I say, wrote about this at length. I've spoken about it, I think, now too long for most people, but the reaction around Europe has been equally respectful and recognising his brilliant combination of skills and stuff.
Yeah, I think so. And I think what made him so relatable to so many people in so many countries and at so many clubs, of course, not just the fact that his friends from the old days went to play off for different clubs and so did he, is the fact that he wasn't one of these academy kids, actually. We think of people from that level having been players who were sure things since they were 9 or 10 years old. He wasn't. Remember his local club, Gondomar, where his parents paid €20 a month for him to go and play there. He was there from the ages of 9 to 17. And so it was never nailed on that he was going to be a pro. And I think when fans look at a player, to see a player who has not to say that academy players don't have it hard and don't put everything into it, because of course they do, but to see someone who's not necessarily fated, who worked because he loved the game and then just happened to get to the top level, I think fans love that, and that's why they found him so relatable, and that's why you ended up with this player who had the ability to be at the absolute elite of European football, but had the lack of ego that he could do whatever job was given to him, that he could, I suppose, to use American sports bit of terminology, he was a star player with the application of a role player, that he would just slot in uncomplainingly wherever, and that's a huge part of who he was, and I think why he was loved so much. And you could tell that rather than ticking off the boxes to get to where he wanted to go, he enjoyed every bit of it. He loved being at Passos, and he stayed in touch with everyone at the club. He took a lot from Atletico Madrid, even though that didn't really work for him there, and he made loads of great friends there, even though it didn't really work out. I think Wolves, to me, is a hugely pivotal part of his story, because him and Ruben Neves, his great friend, who we saw, really, really suffering actually at the beginning of that Al Hilal game, of course, during the minute's silence, and then made it back to Gondomar in time to be one of the pallbearers. They arrived at Wolves at the same time, of course, with very different trajectories. And I think both of them, when they arrived, you thought, okay, these guys have got ability, but how are they going to cope with 46 matches in the Championship? And it's because both of them are enormous characters and really down-to-earth people as well as good players, that they managed to dig in and really, I guess, ingratiate themselves with English football in that way. And that showed, I think, the determination and the humility that took both of them and took Diogo Jota to the top, as well as the ability.
Yeah, and I was genuinely moved, Andy, by the tributes from all across professional football, where, as I say, there are gripes, there are rivalries, there are ancient hatreds embedded in the game, and yet nobody could find anything but, I know it happens when people die, but you could sense that the tributes to him as a person and as a family man were absolutely heartfelt. And as again, because I think Andy's line was fluttering a little bit, we should say that we're here at Trans Europe Express, for what it's worth, send our best wishes to all of his family and friends, obviously, and those of you as well who are supporters of clubs that he played for, who are feeling this particularly keenly. An extraordinary, sad event in the world of football. Thank you, Andy. Of course, the sport goes on, whether... of course it does, and proper tributes will be paid to him, I'm sure, at the start of the season. Wimbledon is in. We're now heading into the crux of the tournament. Let's get the latest and everything that's happened today. We're joined, of course, from there by Lisa O'Sullivan.
Evening, Danny. Well, Cam Norrie is the last man standing for the Brits at Wimbledon. He looked to be cruising. He had match point in the third set tiebreak, but Chile's Nico Jarry had other ideas. It took Norrie another hour and a half and 2 more sets to get over the line. He'll play Carlos Alcaraz in the last 8, the Spaniard coming through another testing 4-setter. Andrei Rublev took that first set tiebreak and put barrier after barrier in the way. The defending champion finally coming through 6-3, 6-4, 6-4. And the final match of the night is being played over on court number 1, where Linda Noshka, the number 30 seeds, taking on Amanda Anisimova. They are a set apiece, but it's Noshkova who has the break of serve. She leads 3-2 in the third.
Yeah, thanks very much, my old friend and colleague Lisa O'Sullivan there. And of course, the Women's Euros 2025 continue apace. Tonight's game is in Bern. Switzerland are taking on Iceland. They're into the second half, almost an hour gone. Watching the talkSPORT, Charlotte Richardson.
It's Switzerland 0, Iceland 0. Iceland have hit the crossbar for a second time this evening. A direct free kick 20 yards out, and Central hit powerfully and with precision too by Carolina Lea Wilhelmsdottir. The hosts yet to register an attempt on target, and you can feel the frustration beginning to fizz amongst the 32,000 Swiss supporters as their side lacking any real attacking threat. They've just made a double substitution in the hope to atone that. Switzerland 0, Iceland 0.
UEFA Women's Euro 2025 update on talkSPORT with McDonald's. The new Big Arch has landed at McDonald's with its very own signature sauce. Available from 11 a.m. at participating restaurants.
Okay, listen, we'll keep you up to date with that game in Bern, where the Swiss have just brought an excellent save out of the Icelandic goalkeeper. But the game remains 0-0. Next, we'll turn our attention, so much football on even though it's supposed to be the closed season, to the Club World Cup. That's coming up next here on Trans-Europe Express. Tonight's edition of Trans-Europe Express with me, Danny Kelly, and him, Andy Brassell. Andy, the Club World Cup, I mean, it's brought some interesting things to us, you know, the semi-professional players of Auckland and one or other things. Some of these ties towards the latter end of the tournament are starting to look like business as usual. By that I mean, Paris Saint-Germain played Bayern Munich as they would do in the last stage of the Champions League. The result we'll tell you about in just a second for those of you who missed it. But of course, what was very, very typical of ties between this level of European clubs is the amount of controversy afterwards. I mean, particularly about the injury to Jamal Musiala. Paris Saint-Germain won 2-0. Bayern very red-faced, very hot still again, isn't it? But tell us about what happened with Jamal Musiala, which is, you know, a really, really serious injury, and the aftermath. I'll do the start for 10. I'm not sure Bayern Munich should have been getting involved at the level they were in suggesting that the injury could have been avoided.
No, I think that's fair to say. And it's an extraordinary thing, as you say, Danny, that you get to a game like this, in a tournament like this, and a game that gives a tournament meaning, really, like this. It ends 2-0, you get a couple of red cards, and none of that is the talking point, really, because the injury to Jamal Musiala happens on the brink of half-time when Michael Elise plays a ball down the wing, which it looks as if PSG have covered. Musiala comes in on the blind side to try and take it from Donnarumma, and Donnarumma takes him out, like really completely not on purpose. And look, I realise like that's not the point when it comes to punishment, etc., etc. But the suggestion that Bayern made, and obviously Musiala was very badly injured in the challenge, dislocated ankle, ligaments as well. We're looking at 4 to 5 months absence, so this clearly changes Bayern's plans for next season. But for both Manuel Neuer and Max Eberl, the sporting director of Bayern, to claim that he didn't show, Donnarumma didn't show enough care for Musiala, I thought was was really unfair, really unfair. And Neuer's words, and obviously the Bayern players were upset by that. I understand that. Obviously Donnarumma was upset by it, as we saw after the challenge. He couldn't look.
It was one of those injuries, just for those who haven't seen it, Donnarumma turned away from the site where the people were treating Jamal, and went down on his haunches, facing directly away from the player. And one by one, the players of both Bayern and PSG, not all of them, but maybe a dozen in total, wandered over to the site like they do normally to say, put a hand on the shoulder and say, you'll be all right in 5 minutes, mate. But they all looked visibly shocked. It was obviously a very serious injury. And Andy, look, this is not necessarily normally a good defence, but truthfully, you have seen players, goalkeepers, but players as well, challenge people like that. And I would say 499 times out of 500, there's absolutely no effect. Somebody gets a clatter, they get up, they play on. And the implication, which was coming directly, as I say, from some very important people at Bayern, what was odd about it was they were saying no law had been broken within the game, but it didn't show due consideration. And I just thought, particularly with Manuel Neuer, who I don't know, obviously, Manuel, you're going to be careful here, because in a week's time, you're going to be required to make a similar challenge on the edge of the penalty area.
Yeah, they're both experienced people, and it really wasn't fair. And I think even if you look at the replays, look, even if you thought it was a penalty, which I realise is a very small minor point in this discussion,
given the outcome, yes.
You could make that, or given the challenge and that he got the player ahead of the ball, I think you could make that argument. To say that it was reckless or negligent is just completely unfair, because you could see as Donnarumma came out, he tried to go around Musiala rather than through him, which I don't think every player would have done in that situation. So I thought it was obviously indicative of their disappointment, but not in any way justified.
Sure, and you also are involved in a sport, let's be absolutely frank about this, it's still a collision sport, or at least a contact sport, in which some people, and in this particular case, one person is physically much bigger than the other. Now, that, of course, doesn't always lead to an injury, and the big person, just as like, bones are brittle, ligaments are fragile, but it really was an unfortunate accident. And I think Bayern Munich will probably backtrack on these comments, because they're unbecoming. In the other big game between European teams, Real Madrid beat Dortmund by 3-2. So that looks like an absolute thriller, but it only was an absolute thriller for about 3 minutes, Andy.
Yeah, that's also fair to say. Just as we spent ages talking about Donnarumma on Musiala, when the really bad challenges were the ones that Pacho and Hernandez were sent off for, which means they won't be in the semi-final against Real Madrid. But Real Madrid, this really should have been a routine 2-3, maybe 4-0 game. They were so much better than Borussia Dortmund for most of it. And they were 2-0 up in the first minute of 5 minutes of stoppage time with a corner, to their credit. And it managed to end up 3-2. And you had the save from Thibaut Courtois right at the end from Marcel Sabitzer, which could have drawn the game and levelled the game up and sent it into extra time, which would have been an utter travesty, by the way. I mean, we have teams who have shown that they're really quite firmly building for the future, like Real Madrid, like Manchester City to an extent. I think what they've got out of this tournament, regardless of the final result, will end up being quite positive, because it feels as if they're embarking on a new adventure. And then you've got teams like Inter, like Borussia Dortmund, whose Club World Cup campaigns have just been an extension of some of the problems that saw them not do exactly what they wanted to do in the domestic season, really, and made us think, right, you do need a breather, you do need a bit of a think about things. Of course, I realise that Borussia Dortmund finished last season results-wise very, very well, which propelled them from a really lowly position into the Champions League, and fair play to them. But when we look at the benefits that they got out of this tournament, I'm not really convinced. You know, I didn't really learn anything new about Dortmund in this tournament, and they were so far behind what is clearly the early signs is an improving Real Madrid side, as we'll talk about a bit later. I don't have any massive faith that Dortmund's major problems have been overcome in any meaningful way.
Do you know what, Andy? There's a tightrope, isn't there? They've earned some money to help them repair the obvious shortcomings in their team, but they've lost that other precious commodity in football, the time in which to make the repairs. The new season's upon us, you know. You're going to talk later on in the show about the opening rounds of the European competitions this week. One season is overlapping with another now. We've been through this. It's bonkers, and they're going to have to sort this out. And maybe if any good was to come in this Club World Cup, apart from financially for one or two European superpowers and South American superpowers, it would be that they avoid these mistakes come the upcoming World Cup. The last game, Chelsea beat Palmeiras, and the weirdness of this tournament best demonstrated by who was on the bench and on the pitch for Chelsea, players that were nowhere near the club when the tournament began and are now very much part of the scene.
So, yeah, we had João Pedro coming on, of course. I think you might have asked for an extra week off so he didn't have to come. Maybe that's not how every footballer thinks, clearly, and maybe he feels it's a great opportunity to be at the Club World Cup. But we also saw, before the official announcement of Jamie Gittins to Chelsea, Jamie Gittins wearing a Chelsea coat and hiding under a hat like a spy on the bench for Chelsea, didn't we? And then it was announced the next day, oh, what a surprise! Jamie Gittins is a Chelsea player now. I can't believe it. So it feels like every round there's a greater example of football continuing to eat itself. And I feel this was definitely one of those.
Yeah, and Chelsea, of course, will play Fluminense in the semi-final, no doubt, and Tim Ricky will have plenty to say about that at about 11 o'clock here on Trans-Europe Express, where next we're going to turn our attention to what's been going on in and around German football. What brilliant timing. The last big game of the day, I think, is coming to an end at Wimbledon. May even have done so. Let's get the latest from Lisa O'Sullivan.
Yes, Amanda Anisimova is in tears because she's through to the quarter-final. 6-2, 5-7, 6-4. I kind of know how she feels. It's been one of those days. The lights are out on centre court in front of me as the grass has been put to bed, and they'll be doing the same over on court number 1 after a very, very busy day. Cam Norrie loves playing over there, but he had to go to 5 sets to get past Chile's Nico Williams. The last Brit standing at Wimbledon will play Carlos Alcaraz next, the 2-time defending champion after his win over Andrei Rublev. Earlier, Sonet Kartel lost in straight sets to Anastasia Pavlyuchenko. Their match halted when the robo-line judge failed to do its job, and we've been told that it was because an operator forgot to push a button, so they're blaming human error for the AI failing. Not sure about that. Arina Sabalenka beat Elise Mertens, and Lara Sigmund put out Solana Sierra, and Karan Khachanov will take on Taylor Fritz, who for once, Danny, managed to get the match done quickly, but only because Jordan Thompson was forced to retire. Coming into this, Taylor Fritz had played 14 of available 15 sets, but he is now into the quarterfinals and can have a bit of a rest.
Listen, thank you very, very much, Lisa. You sound like you probably need a bit of a rest as well. It's a long day at Wimbledon. Interesting that the something operated by a button failed there. If you can bear with us till 11:45, you may well hear the greatest something operated by a button story ever broadcast on British media. Meanwhile, we're into the latter stages, you could argue. Certainly the last 15 minutes of the Women's Euro game between Switzerland, the hosts, and Iceland in Bern. Watching for talkSPORT, Charlotte Richardson.
We are, Danny, and it's beginning to get a little bit scrappy. Switzerland 0, Iceland 0. Both these teams need a goal. Sadly, there's no sign of one at the moment. It's been a game full of commitment, but just not the quality required to break the deadlock. Both managers have made changes, can make more, and you can't help but feel that the bench will play a key part in determining whether we have a winner this evening. A reminder that these two nations met twice in the Nations League last season. Both of those games ended in a draw. It looks like we could be on course for the same tonight. Switzerland 0, Iceland 0.
UEFA Women's Euro 2025 update on talkSPORT with McDonald's. Got Big McDonald's hunger? Order the iconic new Big Arch on the McDonald's app. Available from 11 a.m. at participating restaurants.
Obviously, Charlotte will keep an eye on the last 15 minutes of that game for you. Andy, let's move our attention, as we predicted, to Germany. And of course, football is all about timing and sliding doors and opportunity. Jamal Musiala, so unfortunately injured and out for the medium term at least at Bayern Munich. Does that mean that Bayern now accelerate what to me looks like one of the most bonkers transfers of the summer, indeed of any summer, where they attempt to pay up to 100 million euros for a player who couldn't get a game 12 months ago?
Yeah, Nick Woltemade is the name of the window in Germany. Of course, became a real fan and media favourite in Germany last season because he was really an underdog story. As you say, signed for Stuttgart from Werder Bremen, where he couldn't get in the team for free.
Andy, as always, your wonderful flow interrupted by live sport. There's been a goal in Bern. Charlotte Richardson.
Switzerland 1, Iceland 0. We needed a goal, and the home crowd are going wild as Geraldine Mutler slots the ball coolly in. It was a really quick attacking move. Leah Volti in the middle of the park with a really fantastic ball forward. Couple of touches, and then the most important one of all, the deadlock after 75 minutes has finally been broken. And what an important goal it could prove to be in the context of Group A. Switzerland 1, Iceland 0.
UEFA Women's Euro 2025 update on talkSPORT with McDonald's. Got Big McDonald's hunger? The new Big Arch is here. Available from 11 a.m. at participating restaurants.
Yeah, lovely finish by Rutler there. Absolutely putting the hosts 1-0 up. Andy, you were in the middle of telling us about Nick Woltemade and his prospective transfer to Bayern Munich, which may have been accelerated by the unfortunate injury to Musiala.
Yeah, so just at the moment where it looked as if Switzerland in the Women's Euros might need their Woltemade, they didn't. Bayern definitely do, because we were talking about him last week in the context of would it be a gradual handover from Harry Kane to Woltemade. Vincent Kompany had already said like he imagined them playing perhaps in a 2 with Woltemade a little bit behind him. He is 6'6", of course, and presents a particular profile. But without going into great touch for a big man territory, only one header amongst those goals last season. He scored over 20 goals last season and 6 in the Euro under-21s. So there's a lot more to him. And now the idea of him playing off Kane makes a lot more sense now that Musiala's injured. But, of course, there is a financial component to it. Now, if he's being offered a lot more money by Bayern and he's broadly agreed the terms of a contract and he's got his agent to tell Napoli, Real Madrid, whoever else might be interested, he doesn't even want to speak to them. He's that keen to move to Bayern. And they'd be paying him somewhere towards 10 million euros a year, about 8 or 9, I think. He's on 1.5 at the moment at Stuttgart. It's the fee really that's presenting the problem, because Bayern are prepared to go north of 50 million, which obviously would represent an enormous pure profit for Stuttgart. They started out wanting 100. They might have climbed down from that a little bit. I suspect there'll be a compromise figure somewhere between 60 and 70, which would still, I think, represent absolutely great business for Stuttgart. But at the moment, it's finding it hard to get there. So the question is, how quickly are Bayern prepared to push it? Or do they, even as been suggested in some quarters, offer a contract to Christmas to Thomas Müller, who was expected to announce his choice of MLS destination later in this tournament? Now that Bayern have had their involvement curtailed, they'll all be going back to Munich. He'll continue negotiations with a couple of MLS clubs there, and we'll see what happens, because, of course, Bayern offering him a new short-term contract would change the game. I'm sure he would say yes.
Yeah, the eternal Thomas Müller will add another 6 months to his longevity. Incredible. Another centre forward, Andy, perhaps one less widely touted than Voldemada, is Jonathan Burkhardt. And this is quite a low-key transfer. You can tell people the fees and the clubs involved, but people, including yourself, I think this might be another brilliant piece of work by Eintracht Frankfurt, and maybe they'll be doing their usual alchemy of turning mid-transfer value into superstars.
Yeah, I mean, they're Bundesliga Brighton, let's be honest. The way that they develop players is extraordinary, and the fees that they've made selling players in the last 5 to 6 years is something pretty incredible. Saved them from really financial meltdown around COVID. They were one of the clubs, a really big club actually, who suffered a lot from it, with, you know, a big stadium and big overheads in many cases. So getting Burkhardt to sign for them is big, because he had a brilliant season for Mainz, made his Germany debut last season. He was the captain of Mainz at just 24, and it was clear he was going to go at the end of the season. A score of 18 in 28 starts in the Bundesliga alone, and just a really, really technically adept centre forward who can play across the forward line. A lot of other clubs interested in him, but a photo leaked a little while ago of him as a 4-year-old in an Eintracht Frankfurt shirt, and it turns out that some people do stick to that. You know, they really want to live out their dreams. He was clear from the very beginning, and I'm sure it's not just down to that. It's due to the fact that, you know, it does feel like a bit of a catwalk to the real elite of European football, going to play for Eintracht Frankfurt now. It says a lot for them that they were able to nail this deal. 21 million euros they got it over the line for. There might be a few million in bonuses, but way below the 30 million that Mainz were asking for originally. I think he's going to be a star for them. I think he's going to be a star for Germany as well, where maybe he links up with Nick Voldemada.
Yeah, and there you have it. A really good move for him, a really good move for Eintracht, and Nagelsmann loves him, so given that it is a step up from Mainz to Eintracht, a really good move for the German national team as well. If one player we see on the way up, perhaps a player of great potential on the way down, perhaps making a mess of their career, is Florian Neuhaus. Tell us about him.
Yeah, and look, I think you go back a couple of years, and for us Bundesliga botherers, like, Neuhaus was a bit of a favourite, a bit of a cult favourite. Someone who had so much ability. You just knew he was going to get gobbled up by Bayern at some point, because his dad's a massive Bayern fan. He's from Bavaria. You thought, yeah, this is inevitable. But he never quite developed into the number 10 that he should have been. And he hit a new low this week. He was suspended by Borussia Mönchengladbach, having never made that Bayern move, because he was caught on a phone ridiculously by some Borussia Mönchengladbach supporters while he was on holiday, saying that he thought that Roland Wirkus, the sporting director at Gladbach, was a bit of an idiot for giving him a contract that paid him $4 million a year. And honestly, I've no idea. Like, everyone's got a phone these days. Everyone's a journalist. Why would you stumble into something like that? So not only revealing his wages and the fact that really, compared to current output, he's overpaid and thereby piling pressure on himself.
Exactly.
But by tearing out a major figure at the club who's backed him, it's so embarrassing and indicative of how it's gone wrong for him in recent years.
Yeah, but that row between Florian Neuhaus, sorry, Andy, I'll get it right, Florian Neuhaus and the sporting director is of nothing compared to the row between two of Inter Milan's players. That's next here on Trans Europe Express. It would be remiss of us, it would be sneaky to pretend that we don't love a row between footballers, and we'll come on to that in just a second, because, look, anybody with an ounce of sense, we know professional athletes are trained to get past defeat, so they, it is part and parcel of their lives, but the manner and weight of the defeat in the Champions League final for Inter Milan, 5-0, and it could have been 9. The spanking they got was bound to open up cracks in the club and in the squad. All those cracks have been further widened by their performance or non-performance in the Club World Cup, and it's all come down to a kind of UFC bare-knuckle match between Lautaro Martinez and Hakan Çalhanoğlu. I don't know, it couldn't be more fun.
Look, you need your captain to lead the way in these situations, and Lautaro did. I mean, he spoke after the Fluminense defeat that finally ended their season, and it must feel to him like he never stops playing football. And he said rather irritably that, look, the players who either want to be at this club or they don't, and if they don't want to be at this club, they should leave. Now, of course, he named no names in this, even though Beppe Marotta, the general manager of Inter, is quite experienced, kind of outed Hakan Çalhanoğlu in case we were in any doubt about that afterwards. And then Çalhanoğlu replied suspiciously quickly with a response on socials in 3 languages for clarity, English, Turkish and Italian. So media all over the world had it straight and had it clear. Now, this was clearly not something that was really a reaction to what Lautaro said. He clearly expected someone to say it because it was already prepared. And you know, oh, what's this I have in my back pocket? Oh, it might be a full statement in 3 separate languages. And so off he went and said that, you know, I've never said that I wanted to leave Inter. That doesn't say I don't want to leave Inter or I want to stay.
I've never said it,
I've never said I wanted to leave Inter. And went on to speak about his loyalty, etc., etc., etc. Clearly, he wants to go to Galatasaray. Clearly, that negotiation is going on between Inter and Galatasaray at the moment for a fee. And Inter aren't going to give him away, and they shouldn't, because by Çalhanoğlu's own description, he is the best in the world in his position. He's certainly really, really important to them at the base of that midfield, and they're going to need money to replace him. They've got a few lined up. I think this will be not a problem that lingers because I think Çalhanoğlu will go, and clearly this Inter side is built in the image of Lautaro. That's why he's the captain. He's one of the best strikers in world football, and he's a real genuine leader, and I think he's an Inter lifer as well. But if you're Christian Kivu and you've just walked into this, I mean, it's a bit of a nightmare. You're trying to sort of lift this team off the floor after what happened at the end of last season, not just in the Champions League final, although that was
in the title race as well.
And he's a relatively inexperienced coach as well. So the sooner this comes to an end, the better.
Although, if you were Christian Chivu, a former Inter player, you might already have a slightly suspicious eye on Çalhanoğlu, a player who ran down his contract at their city rivals in order to join Inter. So you might already think he's not entirely committed to the clubs he plays for in Italy, is he?
Loyalty in a nutshell, Danny. Loyalty in a nutshell.
Yeah. Look, what does it mean for Inter, this, Andy? I mean, the team will recoalesce they'll have a holiday, have a close season of a couple of weeks, hopefully bring in some reinforcements. But it's not the best sign for their possibilities of challenging for the Scudetto, particularly with Napoli, already champions, re-upping their squad with purpose.
Yeah, I mean, look, they needed to get younger Inter, and this will just accelerate it. The sooner they can get it done, the better. You could argue they're behind the 8 ball a little bit because their season has lasted for ages. They certainly were in terms of choosing a new coach once they knew Inzaghi was going, and Inzaghi might not have been entirely transparent with his intentions there. That's what the club have floated. But Napoli, as soon as they decided that Antonio Conte's staying, I mean, they convinced him with their plan. Not just signing Kevin De Bruyne, he was just the start of it.
Andy, let me, because it's important, it looks like it's going to be a great start for the hosts in the Women's Euros. Let's get back to Bern. Charlotte Richardson.
Switzerland 2, Iceland 0. Alaya Pilgrim puts this Group A game beyond any doubt. An absolutely sensational strike. She teed up the ball perfectly. Really, really quick feet. Bending the ball into the bottom left corner. That just eases the tension that was building here, making these final couple of minutes slightly more comfortable for the hosts, who are set for their first win at the Euros in 8 years. Switzerland 2, Iceland 0.
UEFA Women's Euro 2025 update on talkSPORT with McDonald's. The new and iconic Big Arch has landed at McDonald's, featuring an unbeatable lineup of juicy beef, cheddar cheese, and its very own signature sauce. Available from 11 a.m. at participating restaurants.
Yeah, fine finish. And, credit to Iceland's women here who have really, really made a good game of this. They're not the favourites for this match, but 2 smashing finishes in the last 15 minutes have given Switzerland, it looks like, all of the points. And Inter, talking about them, Juventus, I think a really interesting signing for them. Jonathan David, the Canadian captain, playing in the CONCACAF Cup till recently, subject of a lot of Premier League interest, but no Premier League bids.
Yeah, that's right. And I wondered if there were going to be a few more for him this summer. And I think he wondered that as well. Plenty of inquiries. Napoli inquired. They spoke to his agent as well. But Juventus were the ones that were prepared to go the whole way. Now, I did think he'd been a lot of teams' second choices in recent transfer windows. You know, if Plan A falls through, maybe we'll go for this guy. And I wondered, with him being on a free, although obviously his agent has been asking for quite high figures to facilitate the signing, as he should. I mean, that is his job, basically, especially if his player is on a free. You look at the age that David is, you look at his record, there's nothing really to argue with. He was brilliant in the Champions League last season. There are, I think, two ways of looking at this. Firstly, that Juventus have got themselves a diamond, because he is a player who is at the right age, who's got a great record, who's proven himself in top competitions and relentlessly consistent, and is improving and is going in one direction. And so he will want to unload on teams and show them that they should have been more committed to him, more interested in him. The other part of it, of course, is Juventus have not been the best at developing players in recent years. A little bit like an Italian Manchester United, if you like. So really, for them, this is a big signing, because if they develop him into the player he should be, they've got something on their hands. And obviously, they're getting rid of Dusan Vlahovic, one who's been mentioned as backup for Al Hilal if they can't get Victor Osimhen, who they're struggling to convince to go to Saudi Arabia. There's, I guess, another branch of the Italian striker market. If you can get David effectively combining with Kenan Yildiz, I think it really changes the breadth of possibility for Juventus going into next season.
Full-time in the game in Bern. Let's get a full-time report now from Charlotte Richardson.
It finishes Switzerland 2, Iceland 0. The hosts up and running with a victory that sends Iceland home at the group stages. Geraldine Moutier's well-taken low finish broke the deadlock with 15 minutes to go, and that goal really eased the tension, enabling the Swiss to play with more freedom, and energy from the bench wrestled control as Alea Pilgrim's thunderbolt strike sealed the win. And backed by 32,000 supporters, this win, their first in 8 years at the Euros, will surely be a huge confidence boost ahead of an all-or-nothing game against Finland on Thursday. Dreams of making it to the quarterfinals still alive for Switzerland, but for Iceland, an unwanted hat-trick of consecutive group Euros exits. It finishes Switzerland 2, Iceland 0.
UEFA Women's Euro 2025 update on talkSPORT with McDonald's. Got Big McDonald's hunger? The new Big Arch is here. Available from 11 a.m. at participating restaurants.
And now, as we continue to look at what's been going on in Italy, possibly the most extraordinary story we've ever brought you here on Trans-Europe Express. It will combine a performing bird of prey, a Nazi salute, and, how can I put this, a surgically enhanced organ. Andy, I leave it to you.
Well, look, you may already be aware of Juan Bernabe, a character who's become more and more prominent in the headlines around Italian football in recent months. But I'll take you back to the beginning. He is an eagle handler. He's from Spain. He used to be the eagle handler at Benfica. He was let go by Benfica because when he came to renegotiate his contract here, and he's an incredibly eccentric man. I mean, he's in his late 50s now. When he was at Benfica, he's a bold gentleman, not massively athletic looking. He used to dress in Benfica match days in full Benfica kit, and he would have the eagle fly around the upper reaches of the Estadio de Luz and land on this lectern when he would drop to his knees in full kit and punch the air. He was let go by Benfica when he tried to negotiate into his new contract. He would get a cut of every bit of merchandise they sold with an eagle on it. That was never going to happen because clearly Benfica are a really massive club in the world and they have an eagle on their badge, so they couldn't let that happen. Yep. He went and joined Lazio. The eagle was very confused. He went from being Vittoria to Olympia at Lazio, was very confused by its new surroundings, landed on the roof of the Stadio Olimpico in Rome and wouldn't come down in the first home game. Hence the Roma fans singing, "Where's your pigeon gone?" It improved after that, but he's not only an eccentric, he's a bit of a rogue. He did a Nazi, or as he called it, Roman salute to the home fans, for which he was rebuked, not fired, by Lazio a couple of years ago, but they fired him earlier this year when he had an operation to surgically enhance his penis and showed the results on social media. And apparently, Nazi salutes, small rebuke. This video was something that was completely beyond the pale and made Lazio look really bad.
Andy, I don't want to force you down a road you don't want to go here, but what's the details of this enhancement that he had?
Well, basically, it's battery operated, so it brings him back towards his youth, I think was the way he put it. And anyway, Lazio didn't see the funny side of it. They fired him. He sort of refused to leave his living quarters at the Lazio training ground. And the reason it's a story this week is finally his squatters' rights have ended and Lazio have managed to turf him out. No news on the Eagle mascot for next season, or indeed Juan Bernabe's next move.
Listen, thank you, Andy, for bringing that story that combined, as I said, Nazi salutes and surgically enhanced male members. And we want to absolutely guarantee at this time of the evening to our listeners that no Eagles were actually hurt in Andy bringing you that story. You're listening, bewilderingly, to Trans Europe Express.
Hamilton, now at Ferrari, dares to dream of a record 8th F1 world title, the Tifosi will be hoping the Brits can bring glory back to Italy. To many, Ferrari and Formula One are inseparable. They're the only team in the sport today to have competed in the first World Championship in 1950, are the most successful team in history, and have built some absolutely gorgeous cars. Their first driver's title was won in 1952 by Alberto Ascari. Considered one of F1's most dominant and best-loved champions, he drove the iconic Ferrari 500 and defended his title the year after. It was Juan Manuel Fangio in his Ferrari 250 who secured the team's next driver's title in 1956. Remember, he was world champion 5 times with 4 different teams. Mike Hawthorne, Phil Hill and John Surtees also won titles for Ferrari in the 50s and 60s, and the cars back then were beautiful, and they even sounded great, didn't they? Anyway, Ferrari went 11 years without winning a title until Niki Lauda won in 1975 in the iconic 312T. Throughout much of the 80s and 90s, though, Ferrari looked like they'd never go all the way again. Le Professeur Alain Prost came pretty close in 1990, but lost out to his bitter rival and former teammate at McLaren, Ayrton Senna. It was only when John Todt recruited a swathe of staff from outside of Italy, including Michael Schumacher, that the glory days returned 21 years after their last driver's title. The turn of the century saw the prancing horse sprint to an unprecedented 5 consecutive championship doubles. And after Schumacher left, Kimi Raikkonen reclaimed the driver's title immediately. But despite employing 1,500 people, the Iceman remains the last Ferrari world champion. So, 16 constructors' titles, 7 more than McLaren, and 15 drivers' titles, 4 more than, again, McLaren. Ferrari are truly Formula One's top team. Forza Ferrari.
Yeah, welcome back, everybody. It's the second hour of 3 of tonight's edition of Trans-Europe Express. I'm Danny Kelly. With me, as so often, and nearly always, is Andy Brassell. Football mind the size of several planets as yet undiscovered out there in the universe. And during the course of the next 60 minutes, we've got a brilliant show for you. We'll be taking across everything that's happening in Spanish football, including one of the biggest slaps in the face for one of the biggest clubs in the world that's been happened in the last few days. Miguel Pereira will join us to talk about his new book about Spanish football, just called Passion. And Uma Gurav will join us at 11:15 with all the latest from the Women's Euros, where we've just seen that game end with Iceland going home and the host Switzerland giving themselves a decent chance of going through to the next round. That's all coming up after this.
Carrière le Paris Saint-Germain, Mbappé! Mbappé! Little give and go, Mbappe's in! Oh, Suto! He scored twice in 2 minutes! Tête de Kylian Mbappé. Allez, Kylian!
I should say, of course, since football is now hour by hour available around the world, as soon as we've finished at midnight here on Trans-Europe Express, I'll be switching on the big TV to watch the CONCACAF Gold Cup final between the USA and Mexico. It goes on and on and on. Let's talk about Real Madrid and Mbappe. Andy, he came on following his illness and made a contribution, in a tournament that Real Madrid are taking as serious as anybody there in the Club World Cup.
Yeah, he looked very lively. Now, of course, certain areas of the Spanish media had been trying to build up the dilemma for Xabi Alonso. What should he do? Should he drop Gonzalo Garcia? And should he include Kylian Mbappe? And it was a big test for him. And you think, well, if it was, he kind of minimised it, really, because he started Gonzalo just as he should have, because Kylian Mbappe had been really quite ill, been into hospital, not played football for a couple of weeks, apart from that short substitute appearance in the last round, and really use Mbappe as the finisher. And it worked perfectly. Mbappe looked fantastic when he came on. The liveliest that he's looked in a long time, mainly because he's been in hospital during that time, because he had a pretty good end to the domestic season. Really nice goal to sort of clinch it. I mean, it really needed Thibaut Courtois' save from Marcel Sabitzer, as we said before, to clinch it. But a great finish from Kylian Mbappe at the back post, showing that he's really in it, he's really feeling it. And the Real Madrid have got this like embarrassment of riches, really, when for a lot of this season it's felt, and certainly the second half of the season, it's felt like they've been patched up, dragging themselves through it. Of course, they will have to cope with the suspension to Dean Huijsen after his late red card in the semi-final. But it felt like Mbappe was a massive, massive plus to them in this game.
Interesting, already we're seeing signs of the Xavi Alonso effect. I hope I'm not over-exaggerating that, but the second goal, a bit like watching Leverkusen in the last 48, the last 24 months, it results from a pass from wing-back to wing-back. It was very, very Xavi.
Yeah, instead of Frimpong to Grimaldo, it was Trent Alexander-Arnold to Fran Garcia. And, worked really well. Look, they played such good football in the first half of this. Now, as you said, Danny, we have to hold our horses a little bit. It is early. It is a small sample size. But already it feels like they're benefiting from the shape that he wants to use. And if you think on the other end of that, the fact that they're expected to, and I mean this with no disrespect to Fran Garcia, this is simply the way it's going, that they're going to get Alvaro Carreras, from formerly of Manchester United and Granada, from Benfica, over the line in the next little while. That adds a little bit of extra something as well, because he's a very, very positive fullback in a different way to Trent Alexander-Arnold. So with that, with the performances from Arda Güler, who's excellent again, who created 2 goals, you feel as if we're talking about teams who are really getting benefit from the competition. Yeah. Certainly in terms of forging a new identity, almost the pre-season before pre-season. I think we've abandoned all pretense of knowing which season this belongs to, whether it belongs to 24-25 or 25-26. But I think that there are certain clubs who have needed a bit of a revamp, or certain teams that have needed a bit of a revamp for a while. And this is directly benefiting them. There's no doubt about it. It's a sort of soft launch, as much as you can get at Real Madrid, where every match matters intensely.
I'm glad you mentioned Alvaro Carreras, because he's not a household name, certainly not in this country. Tell us about, in a little bit more detail, what kind of fullback he is, and will he be a long-term solution to the left-back position for Real Madrid?
Yeah, he will be, and he's someone who's very adventurous. He's a galloper. He is a proper left back. He can defend, but I think he will flourish in that wing back position as well. He's someone who creates and can occasionally score goals too. And the other benefit for this from a Premier League perspective is to Manchester United. They're due quite a big sell-on from Benfica, quite a large proportion of the profit. So we're looking something in the region of 8 figures. So that's a pretty good thing for them, especially knowing how tight it is at Manchester United. So not only are Real Madrid and Xabi Alonso keen to get this over the line, but Manchester United, with not limitless funds, is clear to and fair to say, it could be a real boost for them as well.
And I don't mean to be parochial about this. That's exactly the amount of money that Manchester United apparently owe Spurs for cancelling their sponsor, Ineos, cancelling the sponsorship of the official 4-wheel drive vehicle of Tottenham Hotspur. I don't know how they thought they were going to get away with that. They're dealing with Daniel Levy. Oh, we don't want to pay you for that anymore. Okay, well, here's a court for you, and here is my learned friends, and here are some barristers. No, it's like, oh, well, all right, we'll pay you what we owe you, obviously, yeah, all that. Manchester United can't catch a break just now, can they? You're right to talk about Arda Güler and how, it's so difficult to break into Real Madrid's team, but he's giving himself every chance of being at least a very valuable squad player upcomingly. And of course, we mustn't be, they say, one swallow doesn't make a summer, but that 3-2 victory over Dortmund, because nobody can watch all the football matches that are going on at the moment. You could be hoodwinked and thinking, oh, they struggled there. They didn't. They absolutely mullered this team, the Dortmund team, didn't they?
They did. I mean, it enormously flattered Dortmund this result, even though they didn't get the equaliser, they came very close to at the end. And again, another reminder of if Thibaut Courtois isn't the best goalkeeper in the world, he's extremely close. Because the save that he made at the end, really not having to do that much apart from pick the ball out of the net twice. Goals that were quite not in keeping with the game. It's fair to say that he did manage to make that save from Sabitzer, underlined how good he is still. And you think that, as you say, things will change a little bit with Real Madrid. Of course, the fact that Carreras will come, the fact that Modric is still there, but he won't be there next season. He'll be wearing the red and black. The fact that probably means that when Camavinga comes back, you're looking at the moment as if Arda Güler is going to be the main recipient of those Modric minutes, but they've still got various options. You would expect them to buy, I think, one other centre-back before the end of the season, before the end of the summer as well. So we'll wait to see who that is. But look, they're on a really good trajectory at the moment. Yeah. And as we'll come to in the Spanish section, with a few little question marks over Barcelona, I think it makes next season really interesting already.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned Courtois there, because that was a terrific save. And yes, he may not be the best goalkeeper in the world, but he's the best goalkeeper that Real Madrid could have, because that moment exemplified it. He often has nothing to do. That's stupid. That's not the way football works, particularly as they're passing out from the back and all the rest of it. He often has very little actual shot stopping to do because Madrid dominate the ball. But in a game where he might only have 3 shots to stop and long periods between them, his concentration is first class, and then we saw an example of that in that game.
Yeah, and I think it must be one of those moments when you're Xabi Alonso that thinks, I love my time at Leverkusen, but I'm managing and coaching a different level of player here. And I mean that with every bit of respect to Leverkusen, but when you see moments like that from Courtois, I think it must make you think, yeah, I've got a really great opportunity here to do something really special. And that at once he's shaping it in his own image, but being able to work with some of the best players in the world, it's a great opportunity. And, we saw that again with going back to the beginning with Kylian Mbappe's impact as well.
Yeah, they've got difference makers, and every team has difference makers. Real Madrid have a different level of difference makers, and many of them in different parts of the pitch. They've still got their problems. Their balance in midfield still doesn't look exactly right to me, and they've got to decide how they're going to play their 3 superstar forwards, if they're going to keep them all on, or if they're going to allow one of them to sit on the bench or move on and bring Bellingham back into the 10, where he was so hugely successful when he first joined Real Madrid. So, I mean, there are still issues. I don't want to call them problems, but they're very nice issues to have. And Real Madrid making very, very good progress in the Club World Cup. Now, their rivals, hope they would imagine for the title next season, among their rivals certainly will be Barcelona. They have had the most tremendous wet fish slap around the chops in the last couple of days. Stop cheering. That's not fair on a great old club. Stop cheering the fact that Barcelona have got a kick in the nether region. We'll talk about that next here on Trans Europe Express. Yeah, you can't help but notice that Oasis kicked off their long-awaited gigs in Cardiff this weekend, and we're giving you a chance to win a pair of Oasis tickets for the Manchester gig on July the 19th. Yes, you heard that right. Oasis Live 25 is completely sold out, but talkSPORT can get you in. And the competition ends, pay attention, tomorrow. But that's not all. We'll launch the tickets, we'll put you up for a night in a hotel and put $5,000 in your back pocket, completely tax-free. So listen right now for everything you need to know, particularly how to enter.
On iArcade, you have to be over 18 to enter in the UK, excluding Northern Ireland, for the chance to win a pair of tickets to the most electrifying rock and roll reunion of the century, a hotel stay and $5,000 spending money. Text the word Oasis to 83338 by Monday the 7th of July at 11 p.m. and you'll be entered into the draw to go supersonic this summer. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. You must have the bill payer's permission, or post your name and number to Oasis Prize Draw, PO Box 3190, Colchester, CO2 8GP, to arrive by 5 p.m. on the 10th of July.
This is a talkSPORT limited promotion run on talkSPORT, Talk and Virgin Radio UK stations. Full T's and C's at talksport.com. Good luck, yeah? Sorted.
Now, Andy, we turn our attention to use that overused phrase. I must learn something new, actually, to Spanish football, where Barcelona have been chasing the great Nico Williams of Athletic Bilbao, have made offers for him, had expected to get him, but got the news that he was doing something completely different with his life via Athletic's website. Tell us the story, because Nico Williams is staying at Athletic Bilbao.
Yeah, and he's not just staying at Athletic, he's not just giving it the club of my heart business, but he's signed not just a small contract extension, a long one, 8 years worth of contract extension. So he's signed until 2035, which is like past the point where his brother Iñaki will have retired, I think it's fair to say. Possibly past the point where one or both of us has retired, as you pointed out to me earlier. Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, it's remarkable. And as you say, they found out about it on social media. Now, they're very interested in him last summer. Now, this summer, they felt they were going to get it over the line. They felt they had enough encouragement from him. They felt they had the broad contours of agreement, let's say, in terms of wages and stuff. Now, the thing that seems to have held it up is that he wanted to be guaranteed that he'd be registered. Now, I'm not sure if I judge him more for thinking that Barcelona could guarantee that, or Barcelona more for being affronted that this was asked as a condition and saying, well, we can't possibly offer you that, which led to an impasse in the talks. But still, the first time that Barcelona knew about it is when you had this brilliant social media thing earlier in the week where, of course, recently, since the speculation of Nico Williams wanting to go to Barcelona has risen and risen, the mural, one of the murals in Bilbao, which depicts him and his brother and the lifting of the Copa del Rey last year, has been vandalised a couple of times. So it showed someone coming up to the mural with a hood up, you can see who it was, yes, with a spray can, and he sprayed Nico's initials and 2035, and then obviously came off, turned round, removed the hood and said, I'm staying with the club of my heart, etc., etc. And
beautiful.
This profoundly shocked Barcelona, and of course some of his mates on the Barcelona team, including Lamine Yamal, who were fully expecting him to sign as well. Now, I guess we can talk a little bit more about what this means, and I think it's very healthy, by the way, if a player of that sort of quality doesn't necessarily go to the biggest club in the league. It's healthier for football if there's a bigger spread of elite players at different clubs.
Of course.
I don't think there's any doubt about that. Now, of course, the other thing that's trumpeted in this Athletic statement is the fact that his release clause has been augmented by over 50%. So it was around €58 million, so £50 million before. It will have gone up to like a little bit over 75, which I guess is gettable for some Premier League teams. But the immediate thought of this, certainly in Spain and the Basque Country, is he will be an Athletic lifer now. Now, whether this transpires to be the case, look, life's a long time, especially if you're 22. But we'll see. We know it is difficult to prize players away from Athletic. I think the coup de grace in the case of Barcelona is the fact that the player they really should have been going for, given their finances, and given the fact that Deco, the sporting director, has talked all along about finding cover for Rafinha and finding cover for Lamine Yamal. The player they probably should have gone for was Ivan Perisic, who wanted to come, who is playing at still a really good level, who's way cheaper, who they could have got on a free, wages-wise, and who they could have got on a free. In the time that they've been trying to convince Nico Williams, he signed a 2-year extension at PSV.
Right. So that means, if I know anything about Barcelona, that having been made to look foolish, they will look for the next option to make themselves look even more foolish, with no disrespect to the player, but he is having a difficult time. This must mean that Marcus Rashford will now pitch up at the Nou Camp.
If there's one good thing you were going to say about this, it's that, I guess, recovering your form is probably easier in La Liga than it is in the Premier League, where you need the sort of consistency that is going to be hard to get. Look,
I'm not saying it's a bad move for Marcus, but I wonder whether it would be a bad move for Barcelona.
I think it might be a bad move for him as well, Danny, because is he going to play every week? I mean, look, if they're looking at him as a long-term potential and eventually he could replace Robert Lewandowski, I think most people have come to the conclusion that he's more of a wide attacker than a central one. So maybe that won't be the case. Maybe that's not viable, him being an eventual replacement for Robert Lewandowski. Look, it's clearly a move that's very attractive to him and has been for a while. I think certainly at the start of next season, it's hard to see him playing all the time. And I know for a lot of us, we wanted to believe that the best Marcus Rashford was going to come back. I can understand Villa, even if you park their financial situation for the moment and what they have to keep an eye on. I think they would have been crazy to go all in and buy him permanently, especially at those wages. Quite how Barcelona find their way around the wages element of this, presumably United have to keep paying quite a large proportion of it. I can't see any other way that it'll work. Look, I love to see an English or British player going abroad and try something different and how that will help them grow. But at this stage, he is still a reclamation project. Even though we saw good bits at Aston Villa, there's no way they could go all in for him. I don't think at that amount of money. And no. Barcelona shouldn't be looking at him for that amount of money.
OK, well, one transfer out of Spain with a top Spanish player that has been confirmed in the last 24 hours, and it makes me slightly reticent to say it because I fear it's another fantastic building block at the other end of the Seven Sisters Road. Martin Zubimendi to Arsenal. Given the players that he is looking to replace, who've gone out of contract in the last 4 or 5 days, this looks like it's expensive, but a fabulous addition to Arsenal's squad. 2 reasons, Andy. One, Zubimendi he's not the best player in that position in the world because he's in the same national team as Rodri. But more importantly, to me, it looks like they will have the defensive midfielder who's of the top quality, and it will allow Declan Rice to move one forward in their team into his proper position as kind of 8/10.
Yeah, I mean, that's hugely important. But in terms of finding a defensive midfielder, it's just a massive upgrade on what they have. So obviously Arsenal fans have been a little bit twitchy as this has been long expected to happen, but it wasn't actually over the line ink on the paper. So I think it's really positive for Arsenal that it is. Of course, they're making a few other moves in the transfer market that maybe we'll touch on a little bit later. But Zubimendi is so much more suited to what they want. You know, someone who's a defensive midfielder but has a nimbleness to him, who has the craft, who has the ability to bring the ball up the pitch at a decent speed and help them transition, which I think for a team with the forward players of Arsenal and the forward players that they might have by the beginning of next season is
by the end of this programme,
by the end of this programme is an entirely positive thing. You know, we know that they've struggled with making that last little leap, having improved so much under Arteta. This is one of the players who's going to do it for them. I think. I really think it'll be a huge addition to them. And if we're looking at it in terms of European competition, keeping him away from Xabi Alonso and Real Madrid is a definite plus as well.
Yeah, a long time in the promising, but now officially announced. And as what we're referring to there, Andy and I, is that Arsenal are also apparently in the latter stages of negotiating for Victor Gyokeres, who would be obviously the solution to their striking problems ongoingly. We'll talk about that a little bit later, because it transpires, once again, Andy has turned over several stones. That Gyokeres has got, see how I'm hedging my bets between Gyokeres and Gyokeres, I'm not certain, that Victor has got in his contract one of the most loony clauses I've ever heard of. Well, it certainly doesn't particularly benefit Victor or his club or the buying club, but delicious. It certainly nom benefits his agent. We'll talk about that a little bit later here on Trans Europe Express. You're listening to me, Danny Kelly, him, Andy Brassell, 10:30 on a Sunday night. You are the listening millions. We'd love to have you along. Yeah, fantastic guest for you now, actually. You'd be very hard-pressed not to admit in the 26th year of this century that Spain is among the great football powers of the world. You could argue it's Europe's leading football power. A new book has come out. It's called Pasión, A Journey to the Soul of Spanish Football. It's written by Miguel Pereira, and he joins us now. Good evening, Miguel.
Good evening, Danny. Good evening, Andy. I hope everything's well with you.
Everything is, and this most joyous of all possible worlds has been enhanced by your presence, if I may say that. I'm going to go straight into this, Miguel. You are Portuguese. I know you've been in Spain and studied Spanish football. You're Portuguese. What decided you to write your book about the soul of Spanish football in the nation?
Well, I've lived in Spain since I was 22. I'm 41, so half of my life, basically. And I just published last year a book about Portuguese football, really, called Bring Me the Horizon. And when I finished the book...
Really loved it. Thank you. It was really, really good, Miguel. Loved it.
Thank you. And when I end the book, I said to myself, I have to do the same, but regarding Spain, taking advantage of all the journeys I had around the country, the people I knew, the stories that I wanted to tell. So basically, it's just a follow-up of the previous book.
So, Miguel, in terms of the cultural side of Spanish club football, we'll get to that in a little minute. But, of course, people's view of Spanish football, and I guess Spanish football's view of itself has changed a little bit in the last year with the Euros win. How has that informed how you look at Spanish football?
I think it changed massively because I think until 20 years ago, Spanish football was Barcelona, Real Madrid, and that was it. And gratefully for Spanish football, the success of the national side after 2008, winning the Euros, then the World Cup, then the Euros again, then last year winning once more, Sevilla's success in the Europa League, all other clubs like Atletico, Villarreal also making a name for themselves, has expanded the way Spanish football is perceived outside of Spain. And that was one of the focus that I wanted to bring in the book, but also other stories about clubs that are not as well known outside of Spain as those clubs are. But culturally, football is immense in Spain, and they began to feel like winners in this century. They were the perennial underdogs until the turn of the century, and now they do feel like they are part of the winning culture.
Miguel, I'm a person of a certain vintage, so even in my lifetime, Spain has changed enormously. It went from being a country, when I was a youngster, still under a fascist junta, if you like, and now it's anyone's visited it, it's a vibrant European democracy. How did football survive that transition? Because we know that Franco, the Generalissimo, was a mad Real Madrid fan, but the country changed so dramatically in the past half century. How did football what part did football play in that?
Oh, it did change dramatically, and football greatly benefited from it because we moved from a close idea of Spain as a country where football was all about aggressiveness, attitude, not about flair, not about tactical acumen, into a new era where players were more able to express themselves on the pitch, tactics were more able to be studied, influence from abroad came in during the 1980s with British managers, German managers, Dutch managers that helped to expand the way the Spanish saw the game. And also the idea that Spain, moving from a dictatorship into a democracy in the 1980s, brought with itself a way of dialogue between people who had been at war for so many times, also transcended into the game. And that's why the passing game that we so associate today with Spanish football really only began 30 years ago. And it began when people started to talk with themselves, politically wise, cultural wise, and that transformed itself into sports and mainly into football. So if it wasn't for the transference between a right-wing dictatorship into a democracy, probably Spanish football will not be what it is today.
Tell us a bit about that, actually, Miguel, because there's no denying that Spanish football is very political, is very regionalised. How do you find the parallels between that and Portuguese football? Because, of course, they both became democracies in the mid-70s, very, very close to each other, Portugal and Spain. So how do you think that sort of unites the way their football is developed, I suppose, in the last 50 years?
Well, one of the things that greatly divides them is that Spain is probably the most complex nation in Europe by far. All those original differences, all the cultural differences are there, and probably without accepting Yugoslavia, that's not here anymore. They are extremely diverse, while Portugal is a country which is very similar, north to south. There are some small regional differences, but mainly it's a different country. What changed in Portuguese football was they lost their African empire. They lost the ability to recruit players from Africa, players like Eusebio, who were key for their international success in the 1960s. So they had to move to Brazil. They had to move to other markets. They had to develop more their youth systems. And that's why Portugal has become, over the last 30 years, one of the best nations regarding producing youth talents, while Spain developed by enhancing the differences of their different regionalities. For so many decades, they were forced to feel as one and to think as one, but one close idea around the Castilian mindset of Franco, that when democracy came, then the people in Galicia, people in Catalonia, people in the Basque Country, people in the South Andalusia were more able to express themselves. And that brought a richness to the game, a diversity to the game that Portugal doesn't have, because essentially from north to south, Portugal is almost the same nation.
And when you talk about that sort of development and needing to find new ways to produce players, that's really fascinating to me, because as you said at the very start when you started talking to us, it was, if we go back to Spain winning the Euros in 2008, in 2012, the World Cup in 2010 in between, we kind of I think outside Spain, we always have this feeling that Real Madrid, Barcelona, Spain is sort of interchangeable, that it's sort of part of the same Venn diagram. How important is that in the development of modern Spanish football, that we look to the Basque Country now for a lot of the production of Spanish players, and especially when you look at the very separate history of Spain and the Basque Country, and how they see themselves as, especially the Basque Country sees itself as very different to Spain. How different does that make the side that won the European Championship in 2024?
It's greatly different to the one that won the treble between 2008 and 2012. I think that generation of great players was a mix of the winning mentality of Real Madrid, a club that is focused on winning at all costs, represented by the likes of Iker Casillas or Sergio Ramos, and the tactical mindset that Johan Cruyff brought to Catalonia and to Barcelona that they didn't have until the 1990s, and that was represented well by the Xavis, the Busquets, the Iniestas. So they kind of mixed together so many years in the youth teams of the national side that they ended up following that formula that proved to be so successful. While if we look to the generation that won the Euros last year and are big candidates to win, or at least to fight for the World Cup, or probably the next 2 or 3 international competitions, because they all are so young, is that finally they got the ability to bring players from different sides, also very young, but with different ways to express. And at the same time, for the first time in Spanish history, they were able to bring people that were from different cultures. It's the first time that players who were born in Africa or were sons of people who were born in Africa or in South America were able to play for the national side. Players like Lamine Yamal, players like Nico Williams, who were decisive for the national side. And that, alongside with the Basque players, as you mentioned, who has finally found a way to express themselves within the game, with two sides that have developed so much over the past 10, 15 years, like Athletic Club and Real Sociedad, they brought a different imprint to the national side. So they are not as dependent of Barcelona and Real Madrid as they once were. And that is also a way to find a different type of success, a success that expands to all nation and not only to the two big sides of it.
Miguel, look, first of all, I guess looking at threats in the future, you obviously have the situation in Spain where the Basques and particularly the Catalans are looking for independence from the Castilian centre. But more widely, the continued financial dominance of world football by the Premier League, and I wonder whether this is going to be when, if one more American owner comes in, suddenly you'll have American owners with the ability to change the Premier League yet again, because the voting rights will stack up. How does Spanish football continue to react to the power of the Premier League? Because we've seen, for instance, Barcelona desperately paddling in the water, splashing about with pulling financial levers. This is a lot of pressure coming from England, isn't it?
Yeah. Over the past, I would say, 5 years, the Spanish league looks to the Premiership as rivals, as direct rivals, because probably that is one of the main reasons why Florentino Perez, Real Madrid chairman, has been so adamant that the Super League needs to go ahead. Because the Super League for clubs like Real Madrid or Barcelona, and even clubs in Italy or in Germany, they see it as the only way to compete financially with the owners from the United States or from the Middle East that are now populating the Premier League. So Real Madrid, Barcelona, and probably also Atletico Madrid look forward to the Super League as a salvation to the situation that they're living, while smaller clubs who are already used to be swallowed up by the Real Madrid and Barcelona, usually in the past take their best players, and now they are selling the players directly to the Premier League, see them as an opportunity to make some money and then to invest that money into develop youth talent. And that's also why one of the reasons why over the past 5 to 6 years there have been so many under 21, under 19, and under 15 Spanish national sides winning competitions, because smaller clubs understood that they now need, like the Portuguese in a way, to focus more on youth development than to sell that talent to the Premier League or to the bigger fortunes in Europe. And while at that moment Real Madrid, Barcelona and Atletico Madrid are focused on creating a competition that allows them to stay at the top of the pyramid, at least on the continental level.
Now, we opened by saying that you're actually a Portuguese person, although you've lived, as you say, for half your life in Spain. Let's end on a positive then. If I said to you one thing, what is your favourite thing about Spanish football? What would you say to me?
Well, I think the favorite thing is in the book title. It's the passionate way they live it. I think it's a country that lives football 24/7. Everywhere you go, people breathe football, talk about football all the time. It's a pity that it's not as community-based as it happens in the UK or in Germany, and people tend to flock more to winning sides like Real Madrid and Barcelona. But in a sense, they really feel football as an indispensable part of their lives, and that's something that I really love and respect, something that probably other European nations lack in that sense, and that's why I wanted to reflect it on the book title.
Well, Miguel, thank you for joining us. If I haven't yet had a chance to read your book, but if it's as good as your book about Portuguese football, then it's going to be a favourite in the Kelly household. I recommend it to you people, sight unseen. The book is called Passion, The Search for the Soul of Spanish Football, and he's called Miguel Pereira. And I thanks to him for joining us here on talkSPORT this evening. Yeah, the Women's Euros 2025 is now in full swing. Everybody's played. Indeed, some teams have played twice. Watching all of the tournament, looking out for the trends and the great performances. Delighted to say talkSPORT's Uma Gurav joins us live from Zurich now. Good evening, Uma.
Good evening. How are you?
Really, really good, and very pleased to have you along for this this section of the show. I don't want to be too parochial, but I think we should start with England. I watched the game with France, and although the result was close, Uma, I think it's one of those games where England will come away having learned a lot about themselves because they were second best.
Yeah, I think they have to come away from it thinking that way, and they have to learn a lot about it, because it was a really tough watch. And I think today has been tough, not only for the team, but I think also for the fans, because we've gone into this tournament expecting so much from the defending champions. And I think it wasn't so much that, the result was bad. I just think that England didn't put on a good showing for themselves. And we knew that France were always going to be a tough opponent. And it just didn't feel like England gave them a good enough game. And yet, whatever that was down to, I think some of the players just couldn't handle it. Like players like Lucy Bronze, Jess Carter, Georgia Stanway, who were so used to putting in amazing performances for England, just didn't look themselves yesterday. And that's seriously worrying. But, we've heard from the camp today, we spoke to some of the players, and the message is immediately, we're turning ahead, we're looking to the Netherlands on Wednesday. That's our only focus, because we have to win that. And they know they have to win that, and that's all there is to it now.
Uma, how much of a result was that for France coming into the tournament? It feels like it's a real sense of relief around the camp, because there was a lot of tension going in. Of course, they're one of the favourites for the competition, among the favourites for the competition, but there were some quite interesting picks in the squad. Some big names were left out, including Wendy Renard, Eugénie Le Sommer as well. So was this something that they really needed to get off to a positive start?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think France are one of those teams who, even though they're one of the big hitters in the women's game, they've never actually even made it to the final of a major tournament, let alone win it. So there's so much pressure on them. And I think the manager, Laurent Bonadai, he faced a lot of backlash after he made those decisions that you mentioned there. And there was huge pressure on them to pull out a result here and to get one on over the defending champions. I mean, there's not a better way to start the tournament. I think now for them, it's about going forward. They've got some clearly great talents within their ranks. Have to highlight Delphine Cascarino, who was absolutely incredible on the right wing. England just didn't know what to do with her. And I think for France now, it's about whether or not they can actually go deep in this tournament. I think, that result will probably mean they'll top the group, really. So for them, it's now look ahead to the knockout stages, obviously make sure they clean up in the groups and finally see if they can break this duck of not winning a major tournament.
As you say, Uma, England next game is, a do or die really against the Netherlands. The Netherlands beat Wales handily by 3-0, and we should take note that Wales are the lowest ranked team who qualified for the tournament. How did the Netherlands look, or was the difference between the two teams actually made the Netherlands look perhaps better than they might be when they play England? That's a really awkward way of asking how good are the Netherlands team.
Yeah, it's hard because the Netherlands we know historically to be a really good team. Obviously, Serena Wiegman managed them right before she came to England. She won the Euros with them. And I think, unfortunately for Wales, the result was a little bit harsh on them because they conceded right on the stroke of half-time. An amazing shot from Viviane Miedema, one of the greats of the game. And it was her 100th goal for the Netherlands. And it's just one of those that no team can do anything about. And I think had Wales gone into half-time level, as perhaps they should have done, because they were defensively really solid, and I think they can take a lot of credit for that, perhaps the result wouldn't have been quite so big. I mean, as it is, I still think they can be quite proud of their performance. As for the Netherlands, they do carry a threat, absolutely, but I do think also a lot of the time they are reliant on a key few players within their ranks. Can England beat them? Absolutely. They have the quality to do it if they perform to their best, and I think they just have to look at players like Viviane Miedema and work out how they're going to take her out of the game, how they're going to make sure that she doesn't cause them problems. And then they just have to, I think, exploit the gaps in the Netherlands' defence because they are there. Even Wales, I think, had the chance to get through them at times. And England, they're European champions. They have to find a way through. And I have no doubt that they will, even though it's been a tough kind of fallout, I think, from the first game.
How much of an opening statement, Uma, was it from Spain? I mean, we're talking about the favourites. They have to be amongst them. That they put out such an opening salvo, and at the same time, they didn't start. Aitana Bonmati, of course, has been struggling with injury coming into this tournament. Are they the team to beat, do we think?
Oh, 100%. And I think that's what makes it more painful for England, the way they started. Spain, there was absolutely no doubt. They came into this tournament, they proved just why they are the world champions. They proved that even though, as you mentioned, they may not have the best player in the world, I think, currently fit. Obviously, she was suffering from viral meningitis ahead of the tournament. They just proved that they've got so much depth, and the quality is everywhere. The goals can come from everywhere. 4 different goal scorers I think we had. And yes, I know they were going up against Portugal, who perhaps are not the strongest of opponents, and it was a tough day, I think, for them. We saw England beat them at Wembley not so long ago as well, 6-0. I think for Spain, there's just never been a question that they are going to top that group. And yes, they should really be beating the likes of Belgium, Italy and Portugal. And on the other hand, England have got a really tough group. But I think for Spain now, it's about just putting down the marker and proving to teams that, this is the one thing for Spain that they haven't got. They've conquered the World Cup. And now they're coming back, and it almost feels like they're kind of cleaning up that one competition that they don't have. And I think they will be really tough to beat. I think the only kind of other contenders are Germany, who also cut out a really strong performance. I think they had to work hard for their result, but they looked really strong as well. But yeah, certainly those two, I think, are the teams to beat.
And tonight we saw, I presume it's exactly the same as any other international tournament. You need for the country to coalesce around the tournament and for it to come on fire. You need the host nation to make some progress, at least to get out of the group stages. And for 75 minutes, Switzerland were really struggling against a very strong and determined Iceland side, but they got the job done. How important for the tournament is that they make it through to the knockout stages?
Oh, I'm delighted for Switzerland. I've just come back from the Zurich fan park where I was sitting with the Switzerland fans, chatting to them, watching the game on the big screen. And it's just wonderful to see, I think, the host nation. Actually, deservedly, I think, in the end, because they really switched it on that last 15 minutes. And I think the 2 goals, Geraldine Reutler, who scored the first goal, she deserves so much praise because I think she was first to everything in that game. I was saying halfway through, I could struggle to find the player of the match, and then she steps up and I think just proved why she deserved it. And her country, I think, have got a chance now to go through to the knockouts thanks to her. For Switzerland, it's key because, we saw what England's win in 2022 did for women's football in the country. And I think for Switzerland, even though the hopes won't be as big as that, it's been massive. And just seeing the Swiss fans walking around, young children with the names on the back of their shirts, and I think the country's getting behind it. And if they can make it through to the knockout stages, that's just going to be huge, I think, in terms of investment. The names in this team, they have got a few big names out there. And I think it's just important to know because they had a tough run into the tournament. There were some controversies about whether or not the Swiss government were going to fund them enough or not. And in the end, they did. And it's been a great tournament so far. Now we just need to see the team really prove why they deserve to be hosting this tournament, basically.
Uma, I'm fascinated. We've mentioned England, Spain, France and Germany, 4 of the traditional really big 5 nations in European football. Italy have qualified. Indeed, they've won their first match in Group B. How far are the Italian women's team from becoming a major power themselves? Because, you as we've said already, the big countries are now the powerful nations in women's football as well. What can we expect from Italy?
Yeah, I'm really surprised that Italy won their first game, actually, because they're up against Belgium, who, while they're not necessarily the strongest team, they've definitely had the better of Italy in their most recent matchups. I think their last 3 matchups, Italy have lost to Belgium. So I was really surprised, and it was a great, kind of those wonderful moments from Ariana Caruso, which won the game for them. I think with Italy, I just think the backing isn't quite there yet. How far are they from becoming one of the giants? Quite far at the moment. I think their record in major tournaments hasn't been great. And for them, I think the goal here is getting out of that group. And it's a tough group for them, obviously, with Spain in there. There's no givens, I think. Whether or not, I think also the problem for Italy is they don't necessarily have one of those standout stars that you can rally behind. And I think some of the lower ranked teams have that. Even Poland, we saw they've got Iwa Pajor, who plays for Barcelona, and she kind of, I think, rallies the team. Italy don't necessarily have that, so I think they're having to rely upon this team spirit. I hope that they can do well because I want them to be able to go back to their country and say, look, we've got something here, but we need the backing from the nation to be able to develop into one of these major teams, because there's such an absence, I think, on the big stage.
Well, of course, their men's team is so flibbity gibbet these days that if the women's team did well, they would be the best supported team in the country. Mate, I think I've tried to decipher from your tone of voice, and it's always a mug's game, that who you think, and we won't hold you to this, might be the ultimate winners. Spain, I think, are your favourites.
You know what? I've been asked this so many times, and my head and my heart are telling me two very different things. Because yes, I know logically I can't look past Spain, but after the England game, I was absolutely devastated last night. And then somebody said to me, just remember when Spain lost that first game at the World Cup to Switzerland and they went on to win it. That can still happen for England. I honestly, in my heart, believe that we can defend this title, and I will back this England team until the end. I think they can do it. So, yes, Spain logically, but emotionally, I want it to be England, and I do believe they can do it.
Spoken, Uma, like every football fan since the dawn of time. Thank you very, very much indeed for a very clear exposition of everything that's gone on so far in the Women's European Championships. That's Uma Gurav from talkSPORT there. Still an hour to go. Tim Vickery will join us next. Don't go anywhere. You'll listen to Andy Brassell and Danny Kelly on Trans-Europe Express.
Hamilton, now at Ferrari, dares to dream of a record 8th F1 world title, the Tifosi will be hoping the Brits can bring glory back to Italy. To many, Ferrari and Formula One are inseparable. They're the only team in the sport today to have competed in the first World Championship in 1950, are the most successful team in history, and have built some absolutely gorgeous cars. Their first driver's title was won in 1952 by Alberto Ascari. Considered one of F1's most dominant and best-loved champions, he drove the iconic Ferrari 500 and defended his title the year after. It was Juan Manuel Fangio in his Ferrari 250 who secured the team's next driver's title in 1956. Remember, he was world champion 5 times with 4 different teams. Mike Hawthorne, Phil Hill and John Surtees also won titles for Ferrari in the 50s and 60s, and the cars back then were beautiful, and they even sounded great, didn't they? Anyway, Ferrari went 11 years without winning a title until Niki Lauda won in 1975 in the iconic 312T. Throughout much of the 80s and 90s, though, Ferrari looked like they'd never go all the way again. Le Professeur Alain Prost came pretty close in 1990, but lost out to his bitter rival and former teammate at McLaren, Ayrton Senna. It was only when John Todt recruited a swathe of staff from outside of Italy, including Michael Schumacher, that the glory days returned 21 years after their last driver's title. The turn of the century saw the prancing horse sprint to an unprecedented 5 consecutive championship doubles. And after Schumacher left, Kimi Räikkönen reclaimed the driver's title immediately. But despite employing 1,500 people, the Iceman remains the last Ferrari world champion. So, 16 constructors' titles, 7 more than McLaren, and 15 drivers' titles, 4 more than, again, McLaren. Ferrari are truly Formula One's top team. Forza Ferrari.
Yeah, welcome back, one. Welcome back all to the third hour and final hour of tonight's edition of Trans-Europe Express with me, Danny Kelly, and Andy Brassell. Lots to get through. Andy will take us around the leagues at 1:45. We'll bring you all the latest from France, including the return of a legendary player, no other word will do, to his home league. We'll also have a club focus on Fenerbahce. Jose Mourinho looks like he's going to stay there, and he's reinforcing his squad. Can they seriously take on Galatasaray next season? Before all of that, though, it'll be time for us to go to South America and talk to Tim Vickery. You're listening, and we're very grateful for that fact, to Trans-Europe Express. Yeah, let's make our way by the wonders of satellites or transatlantic cables, whatever it is these days. Talk to Tim Vickery. Hi, Tim.
Good evening, gentlemen. How are you doing? And you know that when we meet, when we convene again this time next week, it should, weather delays permitting, it should be all over. But for the time being, I don't know how you can talk about anything else. This is tournaments, gentlemen. There is no life beyond the tournaments. The only thing happening in the entire football world.
Expand on that, because here in Europe, people are taking notice of the games. And of course, there's been a row about the injury that Jamal Musiala suffered in the game between Bayern and PSG and all the rest of it. But people are talking about big transfers. People are talking about the Tour de France. I'm talking about the Tour de France. People are talking about Wimbledon, Formula One, and all the rest of it. But where you are, Tim, no, only the Club World Cup.
Yes, there is almost a sadness, almost a kind of melancholy that soon it's going to be all over and we're going to have to return to parochial smallness instead of the grandiosity that we have. There's some, I've got my grandson here, he's 8 in the week and he's a Flamengo fanatic.
Bless him.
his birthday party next weekend coincides with a final, and there was the hope that it was going to be Flamengo in there. He's taken a quite healthy perspective. He says, great, this means that games in the Maracanã that I can go to will soon be back. But I think in general, people are still hanging on this, while there's a hope, they're hanging on this extraordinary Fluminense story. You know, it's now Fluminense representing the entire rest of the world against Europe. And I have to say, absolutely no one, maybe not even them, saw this coming. You know, they went into this, of the 4 Brazilian teams, unquestionably number 4 in the list. They very nearly got relegated the end of last year. Come the last round of the championship, they were still in relegation danger. They managed to save themselves. They haven't really, no real big money reinforcements. One that they've just brought on board, a little Venezuelan winger called Soteldo. He joined them injured after the World Cup qualifiers at the start of June, and they haven't been able to get him on the field so far. So this is more or less the same players that very nearly got relegated last year, and here they are in the best 4 of the world. Oh, what a story! Oh, what a ride!
So, Tim, we kind of thought that this
please, yeah.
So, sorry, Tim, I was going to say, we all thought it was going to be Thiago Silva's last big moment, almost in contrast with the rest of his career, that he helped Fluminense escape relegation. And in fact, it looks like this is the next last big moment of his career. And these 2 old guys who are making a massive, massive impact for them in this huge tournament for them.
Yeah, and Fabio, the goalkeeper, 44. I saw a lot of him growing up. He was a contemporary of Júlio César, who went on, of course, to Inter Milan. When they were coming through the ranks, I used to think that Fabio was the better of the 2. And there were years when I thought that he was saving Vasco da Gama from relegation. His form just dipped at a vital time. And although Brazil carried him around for a while, he never got on the field for Brazil, never played for Brazil. So this tournament is every World Cup there's ever been for him, you know, and he's rising to the occasion. The entire team are rising to the occasion. They've had a little bit of luck, and Thiago has had a little bit of luck, because you always remember mistakes when they get punished, and they get forgotten when they don't get punished. And the one for Inter Milan that De Vrij, I always want to call him De Vrij. It some way sounds better. The one that De Vrij put wide from 2 yards against Inter Milan was Thiago being beaten at the far post, you know, strategic position. He's given the ball away once or twice, but he does marshal the defence so well. And what was fascinating about the victory over Inter Milan was that in the second half cooling break, there was a microphone in there so we could find out what was going on. And he's the coach as well. And he suggested, right, why don't we change formation? Why don't we do this? Why don't we go 4-5-1? We'll play Arias up front on his own, and Everaldo will come in, and he can do that. He can run the right side. And the coach there had the wisdom and the good leadership to say, yeah, that's a great idea. We're going to do that. So that's what they did. So Thiago Silva, as well as captaining the side and marshalling defence, is also playing a role as coach. So it really is. I mean, I can't see him getting past Chelsea, but I have to be honest, I couldn't see him getting past Inter Milan. I couldn't see him getting past Al Hilal, and here they are.
Well, I was going to say it depends what Chelsea turns up, but I literally mean that, because who knows what players they may or may not have bought, sold, and negotiated in the spare time. Let's talk about 2 of the players from that semi-final when you, as you so rightly say, Fluminense take on Chelsea. John Arias, already mentioned, of Fluminense, and João Pedro, most recently of Chelsea, who, you know, represent the hopes of these teams, but you also think represent something wider in the game.
Yeah, I do. I think both of these 2 players, you can look at trends in the transfer market from these players. João Pedro maybe belongs a little bit to the past in that, and he started life with Fluminense, and he went very, very young, but he went to Watford, and then he went to Brighton, and now he's come to Chelsea. And I don't know if you saw, I know if it was in the wee small hours of the morning, the Chelsea-Palmeiras game, but when he came on, boy, did he look good. Not just good, he was sensational. Yeah. He really, really looked good indeed. And you wonder if he had gone, as is now the current trend, straight to a Real Madrid, you know, Would he have found the space to develop his career as has happened? When Endrick, for example, went straight to Real Madrid, they don't need him. They didn't need him. I'm not even sure that Ancelotti was that keen on getting Mbappe. He certainly didn't need another one. So, the thing, I'm worried about Mastrantonio, the Argentine wonder kid, going straight to Real Madrid. So João Pedro is a little bit the way, although he went very, very early, and that is what European clubs want, there is the thing of starting smaller and building a career, which it's hard for youngsters to turn down a Real Madrid when they come knocking, especially as the selling club quite often wants it, the agent wants it, family members want it, but sometimes I think they would be better advised just to take it more slowly on the way up. And John Arias, the Colombian, I think he's a candidate for the player of the tournament so far. And it's almost insane that he's still playing in South American club football. I know one person who agrees with me, and that's John Arias himself, because he's been very disappointed at not getting a move in the past. Arias, this little squat Colombian, Fluminense picked him up for nothing. They played against him in South American club competition for a Colombian side. He wasn't particularly rated. They saw something, and he has just blossomed. And with Fluminense, he has a free role. He does whatever he wants, turns so well, surges, combines, got a mean free kick on him. Great little player. For the Colombian national team, he plays in a totally different role most of the time. Very disciplined member of a midfield trio that have to be disciplined because they're carrying James Rodriguez, and he does that as well. So there's nothing he can't do. I remember when City beat Fluminense, steamrolled Fluminense in the final of the Intercontinental at the end of 23. Arias looked entirely at home on that field. He on his own, he took the fight to Man City. And you're thinking then, well, obviously someone's going to buy him, and they still haven't. And the thinking behind this, and this is the way that the market has gone, he's 27 now, and the European market wants 18-year-olds. Now, this is one of the things that I think has helped close the gap a little bit between the best of Europe, or some of the best of Europe, and the best of Brazil. It's that the big European clubs, they're no longer taking the best players from here. They're taking the biggest promises. And so there's more stability with the sides now. Sides are losing the wonder kids. I mean, Estevan, for example, now leaves Palmeiras to join Chelsea. But the good players who glue the side together, they're not being sold anymore. And this means that someone like John Arias can have a sensational campaign. So I think both of those, both João Pedro and Arias are interesting cases in the way that the market's going at the moment.
And let's talk to him about Esteval, because a really extraordinary end to his Palmeiras career for him. We've known for a while that he's going to Chelsea. Shows up big and makes a massive contribution with his goal in this, and now it's all over. But what does his European future look like?
Well, Chelsea is such a chaotic club, isn't it? You don't know how they're going to fit all these players in. There's so much talent there, but how are they all going to fit into the side? Now, what we understand, when Estevan's agent said this, is that the reason that they chose Chelsea was that Chelsea were the club who were most open to playing him as a number 10. And he's played during this tournament. You've seen him play across the attacking line. In the second round game against Botafogo, he was mainly attacking down the left. But his normal position, the one that he filled against Chelsea, is wide right, cutting in. The thing that makes him so great, I think, and didn't he prove that against Chelsea, is that he's got a right foot as well. So he can go outside. When the goal he scored, an incredible finish, in off the bar at the near post from an impossible angle, with his wrong foot. Now, that's real talent. He can just glide past players, but the fact that he can produce an end product on either foot, I think makes him special, and means that wherever he goes, I think he's going to be all right. I don't see him as one of those who's going to move too early and be lost. But quite how they work this out, especially with his internet buddy, Cole Palmer, I don't really know. No, because what he wants to do, he wants to play as a 10.
Yes, well, Tim, has anybody told him that the Premier League is so physical these days, and the need to move all 11 players up and down the pitch, that really nobody plays number 10 anymore in England, and he may have to change his views on that. Listen, wider, Palmeiras, who I think you thought were probably the most likely of the Brazilian clubs, I'm not having a go at you here, really disappointing and really disappointed, I assume, about their performance.
Yeah, because it had opened up for them so well. They were in a half of the draw that had become so accessible. You get past Chelsea, that's not an impossible task. And then you've got either Fluminense or Al Hilal. It was looking like all of their dreams come true. And they're very, very, very disappointed, especially because this was everything to them. All of their local rivals there in Sao Paulo had some kind of world title, and they hear it every day of the week, and this was where they were going to put that right. But it didn't work out for them at all. Yes, they were a little bit unlucky with that the own goal that ended up winning. But you know, Abel, the coach, who's a very gifted coach, possibly might have been there too long. 5 years, more than 5 years. It's a long time in Brazilian football, 5 years to coach the same club. And maybe he was a little bit uneasy with all of the attacking players that they bought, because by nature he is quite a cautious coach. But the first half hour against Chelsea was a disaster. They were absolutely blown away, and Chelsea could have been out of sight. He managed to reorganise the side, block Chelsea higher up, but they never really produced too much collectively. It was a wonderful individual goal from Estevão, and you couldn't really see a great deal of quality in the final third, and especially combinations in the final third. And I fear that the tournament won't really miss them. So this for Palmeiras, I think, was a massive, massive opportunity spurned. I know some Palmeiras fans think that Abel is past his best with the club. Didn't have a particularly good year last year. When they didn't win anything major last year. And I don't think he had a particularly good tournament either. But you always trusted him to come up with something on the day. And he really didn't against Chelsea. And I'm sure he'll be haunted by the way that his side were. I know they had a lot of defensive absences, but if you've got a lot of defensive absences, then you have to protect that defensive unit better than he was able to do, especially in the first half hour.
Tim, absolutely great to talk to you. Thank you very, very much indeed, Tim, with all the latest from South America on the Club World Cup. That is still the dominant topic of conversation. Our topic of conversation next year on Trans-Europe Express is France and the return of a favourite son to the home soil. It is fun to hear Tim absolutely immersed in the Club World Cup. Let's go perhaps a little bit nearer to home now and talk about everything that's been going on in football in France. And in an act of a complete mercy for Andy Brassell, I'm not going to start with the situation at Lyon, though we will get onto it, because one of the greats of French football has made a return. Olivier Giroud, I think still underrated in this country or in these islands, but one of the greats of the last 20 years in football, massive goal numbers for the national team wherever he goes, is going home to Lille.
Yeah, 38 years old and back in Ligue 1 for the first time since leaving Montpellier for Arsenal 13 years ago. So, yeah, it does feel like something that's a nice story, actually. Obviously, he'd been struggling sports-wise at Los Angeles FC. So I think he'd been tapped up a little while ago by Olivier Letang, the president, to ask him if he'd be interested in coming back. It suited him. It suited his family. He's got Jonathan David's shirt, even though you would presume they'd sign someone a bit younger who can run about a bit to directly replace Jonathan David. But given what Lille are trying to do, a little bit more experience is a real plus for them. And it was really interesting seeing him firstly interacting with his old mate Eden Hazard, getting some tips from him on what it would be like settling into Lille. They did a FaceTime call together. They put on the socials, which was quite nice. Seeing the whole presentation and interaction with the supporters as well, locally, who are excited to see him come, and also feeling someone who's 38 years old, maybe being a little bit naive, going, well, you know what? I think the French public will be delighted to have me and Didier and Paul Pogba back in Ligue 1. Well, obviously back. Paul Pogba's not played there before as well. But I think it's something that's interesting to see how it unfolds and also, in the last little while.
I slightly fear, Andy, for 38-year-olds going to the French league. They may have an idea, I've played in the big tough leagues in Europe, but the physicality of the French league, I know Giroud can look after himself, but it is a really, really, really tough league physically. I guess the other thing they'll hope, mine 38. Yep.
It's true, Danny. I guess the other thing they'll hope is that it works out for Lille just like Jose Font did. Jose Font, who's still playing in Portugal, by the way, at 41, but played for Lille up until he was 39, nearly 40. So if it works out like that, they'll be super happy.
Of course. Andy, I'll put it off as long as I can. We have to talk about Lyon now. Now, those of you who are irregular listeners, really, really annoying. You should listen to us all the time. Will need to know that Lyon, one of the great clubs of French, indeed European football, have been provisionally relegated because their finances are in, let me just see the technical, a blinking mess. Now, the author of some of that mess, John Textor, has been ousted. But Andy, they've got an appeal coming this week. I think it's fair to say that the French football authorities will want to see justice done, but also that the last thing they need is one of the biggest clubs in the country to be plying its trade outside of league. We've already seen the disaster of Bordeaux. Where are we with Lyon? What can they do to satisfy the French authorities? And what's your view on whether or not they will be successful with this appeal?
Money, money, money. That's what it's going to take, really. They're going to have to pony up to really cover what seems a really huge hole in their finances, especially as, of course, you can't include TV money, future transfer revenue, all that sort of stuff. They are expected to have to produce over 100 million for this year's budget and the guarantee of another 100 million for the end of this season. So it's essentially 200 million, 100 million actually in the account and a guarantee of 100 million for
that's enormous sums, Andy, for French football teams. It's enormous. Take Paris Saint-Germain out of it. That's just huge.
It is a lot of money, but we're talking about them being under the charge of another Eagle football investor, Michel Kang, who bought the Lyon women's team off John Textor going back last year when we're talking about him trying to plug various holes. So she's got a financial interest as well as being well backed herself and having more personal money, it would appear, than John Textor. Michael Gerlinger, who was at Bayern Munich for 15 years, nearly 20. He's going to be running the appeal as well as the Director General of the club. So clearly there are lenders, financially interested people with a lot of money invested in Lyon staying up. I think they've got a pretty good chance because of that, of their appeal being heard and being met positively. I guess the question is, if Lyon do stay up, what will remain, really?
Will they be hobbled, Andy?
Yeah, that's the question, because, look, all the talk of a fire sale when Textor sort of ran it aground was a bit too early. But having said that, Michelle Kang, she's very practical. It's clear that she wants to bring the wage bill down even further from what it was. It's been suggested that she might get rid of like pretty much all the players who are earning over 200 grand a month. So that immediately tells you that Corentin Tolisso might be spared because he's symbolically important for the club. But will he want to stay if it's a team that's only going to play for mid-table? And, you know, you're looking at Malek Fofana, George Mikatadze, Lucas Perry. There are loads of other players, Moussa Niakate, who could be moved on if that indeed is possible. So a really uncertain future for them. And as well, we always have to attach Bordeaux to this conversation. Now, of course, they were allowed to continue in the fourth tier as if that's an enormous victory. You know, I mean, the plus for them today is they've got a new kit deal over the line with Hummel, the popular manufacturer, of course, make Coventry's kits, for example, Danish national team. €500,000 going to Bordeaux, which in their current predicament is a real plus. That is a figure that gets boosted if they get promoted to the National, which is the third tier, and promoted even further. It'd get doubled if they got up to Ligue 2. The question is, do you trust that money with Gerard Lopez, who is even more of a disaster than John Textor and has been with his own multi-club model? Now, of course, a deal to sell Bordeaux to Oliver Kahn didn't work. Gerard Lopez tried to make out publicly that it was Oliver Kahn's fault. I seriously doubt that, to be perfectly honest. Interestingly, DJ Snake, the music star, who was the MC for Paris Saint-Germain, was a big Paris Saint-Germain fan, and led the celebrations at the Parc des Princes when they won the Champions League at the party the day after that our own Lee Davey was at. DJ Snake, he has said at a festival this evening, I'd love to buy Bordeaux. So let's see what happens next.
Lopez and the Snake. Well, there's a joke in there somewhere, but I haven't yet polished it up. Interesting that as well as financial issues, French clubs are coming under a little bit of, not attack, that's not the right word, it's a free market, but the Saudis are noting that French clubs often need funds or are releasing players because they earn a great deal of money, none more so, Andy, than the newly promoted Nyon. I hope got the name right. Yeah, that's right. So a club that is not only building a brand, but building a city. They are very ambitious and have been since midway through last season when they were heading for promotion from the Saudi second tier, signed Saïd Benrahma, talking of Lyon unburdening their wage bill a little bit. Remember, Lacazette and Tagliafico have also walked this summer. Lacazette has gone to join Benrahma already at Nyon. And now Sunderland, who are hoping to sign as their new goalkeeper, Marcin Bulka, who's been brilliant for Nice over the last couple of years, one of the best goalkeepers in the division. He has backed out of a move to Sunderland to go to Nyon as well. Gave a very touching tribute to his adopted city of Nice. It's so rare that footballers say anything when they're leaving a club that is beyond mealy-mouthed or them crying, actually. Really, really well judged, I thought, by Bulka, but he'll be going off to Saudi as well. So, interestingly, that they were looking at Lucas Perry from Lyon before that. So, it'd be interesting to see if any more Ligue 1 players end up there. Yeah, well, Perry, I don't want to sell French players. He's absolutely Premier League shaped, the goalkeeper, and I wonder whether that will happen. Finally, Andy, you've fascinated me now with the idea of lofts. Those of you who weren't listening last week need to know that these are the places, a bit like a coal hole, but higher up, where clubs park the players they don't want anymore, in contravention, I'm sure, of their human rights, but also of their contracts, but no one seems bothered. Latest to construct a loft, I mean, of course, it's almost, they probably feel terrible they were behind in this horrible trend, Marseille.
Well, look, I mean, ever since Roberto De Zerbi has been there, he's maybe not constructed the loft, but he's not discouraged items that were unwanted being put up there.
He's not friendly to that, yeah.
Last year. And so this year's candidates, there are 8 that are going in this year's loft, including Faris Mumbanya, the big striker who came across from Bodo Glimt and has been out injured for quite a long time. He's not De Zerbi's cup of tea, apparently. And nor is Azzedine Unai, who's so brilliant for Morocco during the 2022 World Cup. His punishment, if we can say that, for turning down a move to the Russian Premier League. No Tammy Abraham-esque escape route to Turkey for him yet. He's going up there. Let's hope he doesn't end up like a moth-eaten emu.
Listen, I will say to the producer who's in there in London, we need to get the noises that pigeons make, the cooing noises, because pigeon lofts keep coming to my mind. And whenever we discuss lofts, and we will be throughout the summer, I want to hear on the radio. Yeah, Oasis kicked off their long-awaited gigs in Cardiff this weekend, and we're giving you a chance to win a pair of tickets to see the band in Manchester on July the 19th. Yes, you heard that right. Oasis Live 25 is, of course, completely sold out. But talkSPORT can get you in. And the competition ends, listen, tomorrow. So this is your last chance. As well as those tickets, we'll put you up for a night in a hotel room, plus put $5,000 in your back pocket, completely tax-free. So listen right now for everything you need to know, and particularly how to enter.
On iArcade, you have to be over 18 to enter in the UK, excluding Northern Ireland, for the chance to win a pair of tickets to the most electrifying rock and roll reunion of the century, a hotel stay and $5,000 spending money. Text the word Oasis to 83338 by Monday the 7th of July at 11 p.m. and you'll be entered into the draw to go supersonic this summer. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. You must have the bill payer's permission, or post your name and number to Oasis Prize Draw, PO Box 3190, Colchester, CO2 8GP, to arrive by 5 p.m. on the 10th of July.
This is a talkSPORT limited promotion run on talkSPORT, Talk and Virgin Radio UK stations. Full T's and C's at talksport.com. Good luck, yeah? Sorted.
That, my friends, the sound of a former Newcastle star in a loft in Turkey. We'll get onto that very, very soon. Because, Andy, we're turning our attention now to our Club Focus section and the ever great fun that is Fenerbahce. Now, it looked after Jose Mourinho spent the season upsetting the authorities, what else, in Turkey, and they have fought back pretty strenuously for various accusations. I thought there's no way he's staying for another year, but at the present moment, it looks very much like he is. Fenerbahce going to try and put together a team to take on all-conquering Galatasaray. And one really major addition to the squad already. Tonight it's been announced that John Duran, not so very, very long ago, an Aston Villa player, is on his way to Fenerbahce.
A very expensive deal to piece together, Danny, but a deal that they really needed at this point in time. I think it's fair to say now. Fenerbahce were always going to try and hit back hard in the transfer market after losing the Super League by some distance in the end last season. And, you know, we said, didn't we, when we sat around here at this time last year, there is no way that Jose Mourinho can not go and win the Super League this season, in his first season. You know, you don't get Mourinho to finish second in the Turkish Super League. But that's exactly what happened in the end. They finished further behind with way less points than Ismail Kartal, his predecessor's team, did. And I guess the real development of Fenerbahce, before we get on to Duran and how he might do, because obviously when you consider how many big clubs wanted him and what a huge amount of money it took to shift him from Aston Villa, it is a big deal for Fenerbahce. There's no doubt about it. I guess the real question over Mourinho is, what my children and their friends would say is he thinks he's the main character. He is no longer the main character. And that seems an extraordinary thing to say, doesn't it, about Jose Mourinho? Because if he's there for one reason, it is to be the guy who projects Fenerbahce and their brand all across the world. And I guess he kind of managed to do that last season. If we look at football as what we so often talk about now, is it's not just the sporting success, it's about the projection, it's about the follows on social media, it's about getting the brand out there. Mourinho was really successful from that perspective, wasn't he?
He took the focus off Gala's lead week after week after week by complaining about referees, pitches, the state of Turkish society. He did it again and again and again. And whether we like it or not...
Yeah, and he was allowed to say, sorry, Danny, he was allowed to say, really pretty much unchallenged globally, because people don't really watch the Turkish Super League globally, which there are a load of reasons for. He was really allowed to say unchallenged, well, in any just footballing society, we would be 5 points clear or 10 points clear. It wouldn't be them, which is really unprecedented, really, isn't it, in sort of democratic modern football, isn't it?
Listen, perhaps the slipping of his aura, if that's what it is, because you've already said, Andy, we're contradicting ourselves here. He still managed to dictate the news agenda, is reflected in the fact that Asensio, Jadon Sancho have had huge offers from Fenerbahce, and they may still accept them, but they haven't done yet. And I wonder whether Mourinho's personal allure, even allowing for the tax breaks in Turkey, is waning.
Yeah, that's why I don't think we are contradicting ourselves, Danny, because if Mourinho was still the main guy, they would have already agreed to come. Now, like you said, they might still do, but both of them are negotiating with other clubs that they know can't pay them a fraction of what Fenerbahce are offering them, I think is very interesting. And Fenerbahce fans who... you know, it's one of the great crowds in European football. It's a phenomenal atmosphere at the Şükrü Saracoğlu, but there has been a little bit of, I think, doubt towards Mourinho in the last couple of months. When we go back over this summer, when we go back to how last season ended, when we go back to the sort of football that was being played in the biggest matches, and I know this is a recurrent discussion with Mourinho, obviously, but there has been. Of course, there were banners in support of Ismail Kartal, as we said, the coach who went before him, towards the end of last season. There were protests against the club. Remember, the last home game was played in front of an almost empty stadium. And now we've seen a lot of players who you may not think they're world beaters, or maybe they were once, but some big players have left this summer. Bright Osayi-Samuel has been the most recent of those. Now, you might not think of him as a star player, but he was a loyal servant, and he was important to them. We've had Kostic go in, Tadic go in, Skriniar's not going to stay. Loads of others, really. Edin Dzeko, of course, has moved on, and he was great for them over the last couple of years. And Duran being the first domino to fall is an important one, given that Sancho and Asensio haven't come yet, and there is a lot of work to do in this transfer window. Now, if we're looking for a main character, really it's Ali Koç, the president, the richest man in Turkey, because he is someone who is going to be challenged by other presidential candidates. Now, what is the big date really is September, because that's when the Club General Congress is. And this is the bit where other presidential candidates, or people who want to position themselves as presidential candidates, will be standing there going, what are you doing to build us a champion team? And so he needs to make some massive moves in the transfer market for it to work. And as we said, if Sancho and Asensio are coming, I don't think it's particularly because of Mourinho. It's because they're being offered an extraordinary amount of money, really. And we don't know what the long-term plan for Mourinho is. I've wondered for a long time, as I think you have as well, that there will be a mutually beneficial point where club and coach can get out of it. Maybe when he gets offered a bottom half of the Premier League sort of job. I don't think they want to go the distance in paying him 3 years, especially when they didn't even win in the first year. I think there's probably another answer for them somewhere. But of course, when we look at the club beyond Mourinho, Alan Saint-Maximin, what he's had to say this week is something, again, that's brought them into the spotlight in not an entirely flattering way, although they're not going to take that lying down.
Tell us why he's in the loft or on the naughty step, Andy. What's he done?
Well, of course, he went on loan there from Al Ain last season. He's quite open for why he went to the Saudi Pro League. More open than anyone has been. He got paid 5 times the money that he did at Newcastle, and then he went to Fenerbahce on loan, where he had various clashes with Mourinho. He was sort of in his good books by the end of the season. He was playing again, despite Mourinho slating his fitness in public on a number of occasions. But he claimed this week that the club had tried to dope him, to give him a banned product to recover from an illness. Now, he said he's put his foot down about that. No doubt he will say he was misquoted and try and back out of that at some point. But they've already threatened him with legal action. And, you know, the truth is, to use Saint-Maximin's metaphor that he was using last season, the truth takes the stairs while the lies take the lift. Mourinho's response to this was, well, you know, the truth has to be fit enough to take the stairs rather than the lift. but yeah,
it's another nutty story coming out of Turkish football,
because Saint-Maximin won't be continuing there.
Yeah, of course. They still got a lot of work if they're going to challenge Galatasaray. A load of work to do. You're absolutely right. We'll have a quick break. When we come back, we'll be bringing you some more stories from around the leagues, including, as Arsenal close in on Victor Gyokeres, the revelation of what he said, why there's suddenly the logjam over his transfer may have eased. It's an amazing story. Andy will tell you that next year on Trans Europe Express. Yeah, still a dozen or so minutes left here on Trans Europe Express with me, Danny Kelly, and him, Andy Bressel. Andy, talk to me about Arsenal having already made one huge move in the transfer markets day, with Martin Zubimendi being confirmed in their midfield, now looking to address their perceived shortage up front with the transfer of Victor Gyokeres. Now, this has been talked about by many clubs in the last 6 to 8 weeks, as it became clear that he's one of the best centre-forwards available on the transfer market in Europe. Why has July suddenly accelerated the processes that Arsenal are hoping to complete in the next 24 hours?
Well, because to bring us briefly up to date to where we are at the moment, the reason that Gyokeres and Sporting have ended up at loggerheads, he feels they're charging too much for him. They feel the offers they've had are not enough. Of course, he already had a buyout clause of €100 million, which we felt to be just nominal, really, that he would be allowed to go for quite a bit less than that this summer. So he feels that Sporting are sort of going back on their word a little bit, really, even if that was a level of protection for them. They've threatened to charge the whole release clause at various points this summer. Now, what has changed is the existence of another clause, which is only effective for July. For the whole month of July, Sporting, of course, have the right to turn down anything below €100 million, which they don't have a right to turn down. But there's a clause that in the month of July, if there's an offer between €60 million and €99 million that Sporting reject, they must pay his agent, Hakan Çekeltin, 10% of that figure. So essentially, if you, on behalf of Tottenham, offer €70 million for Victor Gyokeres and Sporting turn it down, they have to pay $7 million to his agent, which I'm presuming his agent doesn't keep, and he gives some of it to Victor Gyokeres.
It's extraordinary.
It's an unbelievable clause. So presumably, the arrival to the current position where there is an open negotiation between Arsenal and Sporting, it appears, and the deal is getting closer, is because Arsenal make an offer. If Sporting aren't completely happy with it, rather than say outright no, they'll have to go, let's negotiate, because otherwise they have to pay 10% of the figure that was rejected to his agent.
Yeah, that would concentrate minds, wouldn't it?
Wouldn't it?
Meanwhile, also in Portugal, Francesco Farioli has been confirmed as the coach of Porto, which I think is a very, very interesting point. We'll see how that goes. His first signing is the player Dominic Perpic, I think that's how I pronounce his name.
Yes.
Who, Andy... well, obviously, very, very sad to leave Hajduk Split, one of the great clubs in that part of the world, to go to Porto, but had the mother and father of a leaving do.
It's fair to say, so away in Slovenia at the moment, Hajduk Split, and you think it's all going to calm down once Rino Gattuso's left, right? Marco Livaya, who of course is involved as a senior player, absolutely rated as a superstar when he was young, was at Inter, 31 years old now, has been back at Hajduk since 2021, which, you know, respect to him for going back to his home club, but I think that tells you that he's had a couple of left turns along the promise of his career. He, Perpic, and another player were involved. They were leaving a bar. They had their own portable music with them. They were asked to turn it down. Perpic and the other teammate complied. Livaya was not happy with the way the police spoke to them. A drink had been taken, I believe, and it is alleged that Livaya laid one on one of the policemen, and from there it's all got a bit big. They have Hajduk Split have said the way we're going to deal with this is we're going to call in Ceferin and Co. That's right, because they're in Slovenia on this pre-season tour. the best lawyers that money can buy are the family lawyers of the president of UEFA, which is pretty amazing. So at that point, Hajduk's and Perpic's aim of keeping this on the D-Lo sort of became a little bit impossible. Presumably, he wants to get to his new club as quickly as possible. He's rated as really one for the future. Of course, Croatia have had an ageing defence for a very long time. Maybe he can step in once he deletes Marco Livaya's number from his phone.
Andy, between that story, the July clause in Victor Gyokeres' contract, and the man with the mechanical penis that you mentioned earlier, people are going to think they're making this stuff up. The award-winning Trans-Europe Express is entirely made up by two old geezers on the radio. Look, the Gold Cup finish starts this morning. In fact, the kickoff is in 10 minutes between the USA and Mexico. The World Club Championship continues, but European football is back this week. Sees the first lot of Champions League, Europa League and Conference League qualifiers. Tottenham, of course, not involved in such nonsense as qualifiers. Some very, very interesting things coming up among the British teams involved. New Saints, among the bigger clubs involved, FCSB are involved. And, of course, there's an absolute belter here on the island I live on, where Shelbourne from the Republic take on Linfield from Northern Ireland. Joey O'Brien is the new Sheffield. People remember him playing for various clubs in England. He's the new manager of Shelbourne. I should say, Andy, that normally I would say, given that Shelbourne are in really bad form, they're not defending their title at all well that they won here in Ireland. But they have a huge advantage over Linfield. They're in the middle of the season. Linfield haven't yet started. They will not have started. The season in the Northern Irish Premiership doesn't start till August. That's got to give Shelbourne, I would have thought, a real advantage. Though the way they're playing will not give them a real advantage. And among the other teams playing in the very first rounds of the qualifiers, I don't know how are Shakhtar in the qualifying rounds of the Europa League. And
it's big for them because, of course, they want to get back into Europe, keep Ukraine in the headlines. A big new managerial appointment for them as well. Arda Turan just settling in, and big games that count from the get-go.
And then, very quickly, because these qualifiers come thick and fast, I think it's fair to say, we'll have Rangers against Panathinaikos and clubs as big as Dynamo Kiev, Red Star. And you wanted me to mention the champions of Cyprus, Paphos, who couldn't beat Wimbledon the other day.
No, they had a friendly in blistering heat in Marbella yesterday, and it turned out getting roughed up by a League One side is not unbelievable preparation. Juan Carcedo, who was formerly the assistant to Unai Emery at PSG and Arsenal, amongst others, he's taking Paphos at the moment. Okay. So they, like Rangers, like Panathinaikos, and Rangers Panathinaikos is a great second round tie, by the way, in a couple of weeks, opening leg at Ibrox. That'll be interesting. Coming in at the same level, as you say, as Dynamo Kiev, as Red Star Belgrade. So that's when it starts getting serious pretty quickly. Now, I suppose with the advantages of Rangers, actually, Celtic owe them because they've done so well in Europe in the last couple of years. Adding all those coefficient points has meant Celtic don't have to come in as champions in the first or second or third qualifying round. They're coming in at the playoff round, which is really good for them. They'll feel they have a pretty good chance. If you look at who else is coming in at the playoff ground, Sturm Graz, who did pretty well to get in the groups last year. Bodo Glimt, of course, ended up in a European semi-final.
Nobody will want to play Bodo Glimt, of course, yep.
No, and Basel as well, having won the Swiss League for the first time in a decade, who will be under a new coach, Basel, Ludovic Magnan, when they come in, because the coach who won them back the title, of course, Xherdan Shaqiri had more than an assist there, Fabio Celestini, who's hopped off to Russian football to coach CSKA in Moscow. Now, look, whatever your moral perspective on the choice there, the extraordinary thing about Celestini choosing this is the money that he earns in Russia, he can't take back to Switzerland because as part of the sanctions against Russia since the war started in 2022, you get 4 years in prison for spending money that you've earned in Russia, in Switzerland. I know what you're thinking. Celestini's got a house in Spain as well from his time with Getafe and all those clubs he played for in La Liga. It's 5 years in Spain. What's he going to do? Spend it all on beer and peanuts?
And whatever else is currently the delicacies of the day in Russia. Andy, thank you. It's been a brilliant 3 hours. Thank you. Real roller coaster ride of mechanical body parts, eagles and all the rest of it. Thank you very much indeed for listening. Everybody who's listening to my voice now. Let me tell you that I'll be back tomorrow on H&J about 2:30. Coming up next here on on talkSPORT, it's James Haskell. And after the lights go out, you think the PSG will win the World Club Championship according to our polls. And thank you all for being with us for the last 3 hours or part thereof. God bless you all. Good night.
Day for Washington Freedom, and they continue their winning ways. They'd be super happy with that because look where they are. They are currently in first place